Okay, Pearl. Is it okay, Maria? Pearl starts doing roll call?
Yeah.
Pearl, you want to do roll call?
Yes, for sure. Chair McFadden? Chair McFadden? Can you hear me? Are you present? Chair McFadden? Pardon me?
Audio sounds is cutting each other out.
So Pearl,
Yes.
I'll do roll call because it seems like I'll do roll calls. It seems like your audio is breaking up. So so it was Mayor McFadden.
Present. Hang on, let me see if I can get eScribe on here, and then that way you can actually look at the roll call. Do you open on eScribe?
Yes.
Can Joe use your computer for a second? Oh, on eScribe? Do you have eScribe open?
Well, I can try it.
That's okay. I got it. I think I can remember everybody's names.
And this is a good count.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see. So I'll do the easy stuff first.
Should be 20, so yeah.
That's right. Director Lockwood.
Here.
Director Cunningham. Present. Director Page. Here. Director Newell. Director Jackman.
Good morning, I'm here.
Director Hennegram.
I'm here.
Director Papa.
Present.
Director DeBoon.
Hello, Joe.
Good morning, Arnold. Director Graham.
Present.
Good morning, Cheryl. Director Tierney.
Present, sort of.
Good morning, Roger. Director McLaren Cove.
Where is he?
I believe Roger is down south. Good morning, Aiden. Director Watson.
Good morning.
Director Vandenberg.
Good morning.
Good morning. Director Hewitt.
Good morning. I'm present this morning.
Director Main.
Good morning. I am present.
Director Fike.
Present.
Alternate Director Fike.
Yeah, present. Thank you.
And one.
Director Davidoff.
Not seeing one here.
Just one more time for Director Davidoff. Okay.
Director Lund.
And Director Lund.
Good morning. I'm here.
Good morning. And Director Weatherhead.
Good morning.
Good morning. Pearl, were you able to get all of that?
Sorry, Joe, can I just check, is Director Jackman present?
Yes, he is.
And is Director Lockwood, is she present?
Yes.
And is Director Newell present?
Yes.
So everybody is present except Director Davidoff, is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Great. Just gonna open my chat so I can see. Great, okay. Call meeting to order. We acknowledge and respect Indigenous peoples within whose lands we are meeting today. Adoption of the agenda. And all those in favor? And none opposed. Receipt of the minutes. I did see one correction through email.
Oh, pardon me, through the chair. This is Pearl.
Yeah.
When a motion is made, would I be able to get the last name of the person making the motion because I don't know the first names?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Director Hanegraaff, for the adoption of the agenda, Director Hanegraaff and Director Lockwood.
Sorry, Chair, we don't record movers and seconders. You don't have to.
I didn't think so, but did you get that? You don't actually need to have names
At commission.
at commission meetings?
I'm
If you
sorry.
prefer me to do it, I will. Pardon, Amy?
I didn't know if you were speaking to me or Pearl. I'm sorry. There's a lot of feedback.
There is a lot of feedback. Yeah. Do I just like to record it in the minutes, the minutes that I take, so that I have that?
Sure,
Yeah,
I can do that.
Thanks.
Okay. Can you hear us now, Pearl?
It's really broken up, so it's hard to hear.
Okay. Do we need to fix that before we continue, or?
Pearl, could you try turning off your video? So the fact that and is that any better?
So far, yeah, it sounds okay. So we'll see.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna move on to motion for freedom. Yeah, sorry, Amy?
I was just going to say the sound's coming from the boardroom. It's just a lot of movement. Like you can hear a lot of things moving around. So I think it's tough to turn off your video, but it's over cross talking or just papers moving.
There's very little movement here, so I'm trying to figure out where it might be coming from.
It's not typing.
Okay, we'll try to be really quiet. Thank you, everyone. Can we have a movement for freedom? Yes, Director Lockwood?
Director Weatherhead said in chat that she may be driving, so I can watch for you if she
Jumps off. Thank you very much, appreciate that. Can we make a motion for freedom of the floor for Director or Chair Bogle? And I believe Councillor Tate is here, and I don't see anyone else from any other commissions. Did I miss anyone that's from another commission? Okay, can we get a freedom of the floor? Yeah, Director Popoff moved it and Director Hanegraaff seconded it. Any discussion? All those in favor? Great. Okay, moving on to Parks and Trail. Oh, we're at the minutes, sorry. And Pearl asked a question. Minutes, I noticed a correction in an email that it was listed, I haven't double checked it, that it was listed as Director Tate instead of Councillor Tate. If that can be changed, other than that, any other corrections for the minutes? Not seeing any. We don't need motions in commissions for accepting minutes, or do we?
The change needs to be noted. Everything is received. That's all.
Okay, good, excellent. Okay, moving on to Parks Trail Water Access Strategy Update. Over to, is that you, Gary?
That is CJ.
CJ, okay. Welcome, CJ.
Thank you very much. Good morning, folks. I see that the slides are being shared, so Joe, I trust that I don't have to share my screen, correct?
Correct, CJ, and you just told me when you want me to move ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to be here and to provide an update on the Parks, Trails, and Water Access Strategy. So my name is CJ Bly. I'm an associate with RC Strategies, and I have been working on this plan for the last few months. And so today I thought we'd provide you with an overview, some update on where we're at, and some of the key findings of what we've found so far. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Which is what I just said. Sorry about that. I should have said that earlier. So this is our quick outline of what I'll be presenting this morning on. And as I mentioned, some of those key takeaways. So our next slide So just briefly, our overview for this project. So this is the Regional Parks, Trails, Water Access Strategy. And our hope is that this strategy will look forward to the next 10 years within the RDCK. And we're hoping to identify those strategic priorities that will define the future direction, philosophy, policies, and action for, of course, the provision of regional and community parks, trails, and water access services. So I realize that I don't need to remind you all of how important parks, trails, and water access are in the RDCK, but having that strategic direction and that guiding document are what allow us to ensure that your important assets are serving the needs of your communities for years to come. So we're really excited to be working on this strategy. So how are we actually doing that, and how have we been going about developing this strategy? Well, our next slide outlines the project phases and timelines. So we started this project a number of months ago. In almost a year ago, I guess we officially started, and so working around getting to know each other, the background, setting up the project, actually coming out. So myself and my colleague Justin Ellis were in the RDCK in the winter of 2024. We spent a number of days visiting all of your parks, except for one, unfortunately, due to some weather conditions. But visiting all the parks and doing a detailed analysis of the assets, of the features, and some spatial analysis as well. We then been working through analyzing all of that data, as well as doing a desktop analysis, which involves background policy research, literature review, as well as a jurisdictional review and some benchmarking across other regional districts in British Columbia. And the purpose of this background and summary report is to really help us inform the plan so that we understand kind of everything we can about the regional district park system. I'm seeing some chat. Is it hard to hear me?
We're just figuring out how to mute here.
Okay. Oh, it's okay, good. It's not me. Okay, good.
Okay, I'll mute now. That's way better, actually. Just if you just muted the boardroom, very different. Now it's quiet.
Great. So yeah, as I mentioned, we had our field assessment, our ability to do a detailed analysis of the inventory of your parks, trails, and water access areas. Now working through, just finishing actually the background review and summary report, as I mentioned, looking at policy analysis, jurisdictional reviews, benchmarking, and incorporating all of the GIS data. And then we also recently wrapped up public engagement, or actually all phases of engagement, not just public engagement. So public engagement, as well as Indigenous nations engagement and community and stakeholder engagement. And we're finishing up producing the What We Heard report. And so I wanted to highlight that we are delivering some detailed reporting, and we have a meeting with our working group. So Director Lockwood, Director Tierney, and Director Hagenrath. We have our working group that was formed in the spring, and we're meeting November 18th to go through in detail what we can't necessarily cover in detail today, because I recognize how full your agenda is and how busy your time is. Just wanting to let everyone here know that we do have that working group meeting scheduled to go through some of this in more detail, as well as the actual reports that the working group is going to see and work through with myself and RDCK staff before it is shared with all of you and shared publicly. So that's where we're at. We've got a lot of information, and we're really excited about that ability to use the detailed background and engagement findings to inform the next phases. And we'll kind of chat a little bit more about the next phases after I give you an update and some key takeaways from the detailed background review and the engagement summary. So we'll go ahead and move on to the background report overview. And we'll just hit one more slide. So what information did I include in this report and this review? So I mentioned obviously that myself and my colleague were there in the winter. I've now been in the RDCK 3 times to gather information, both on the system as well as the engagement. So we have that detailed inventory, as well as RDCK data on amenities, infrastructure, as well as the spatial analysis. So the actual amount of park land, trails, and then where they're located in relation to your residents and communities. So then we've also done a detailed population and demographic analysis using Esri data as well as PRISM data to really understand, and Stats Canada data, to really understand who is in RDCK, how they interact with park trail rests. We've done a analysis of zoning and policy documents. So that includes regional district master plans for all of the recreation sites, as well as regional district-wide policies and strategic directions. We've also engaged in a detailed analysis of national and provincial planning and policy documents. So there's a number of policies that help guide recreation and park management across Canada. And then we've also finally done some benchmarking and jurisdictional reviews where we've looked at 3 other regional districts and made some comparisons across those districts with the regional district of Central Kootenay. And then finally, really looking at those trends and best practices. So what is guiding parks, trails, and water access management across the country, across the region, and how can we learn from those trends and best practices to ensure that our plan is meeting the needs of the community, but also looking out largely at larger trends in the area around the province and the country. So those are the key research inputs that have been formulating this report. And then again, because I don't have time to go through everything, I will give you some of those key takeaways from the background report, which are highlighted on the next slide. So some demographic trends in the RDCK that we've outlined in this report include population aging, so aging population and population projections. So looking at the proportion of the population within certain age categories and recognizing the needs of folks as they are at different points in their lives as it relates to parks and trails. So we think about what experiences your community members are looking for and how to provide that spectrum, that range of opportunities from our early years, our young folks, our toddlers, our kids, all the way up to our senior citizens, and making sure that parks and trails and water access are really providing those opportunities based on those key demographics. We're also looking at population density. So where are folks living in the RDCK, and how are parks and trails and water access serving residents where they are? Are we actually providing these resources in the communities that are our most densely populated? And then how are we making sure that those folks living in rural areas or smaller towns are also getting equitable access to parks and trails? So really looking at where our parks are located as well as where our citizens are located. And then looking at other socioeconomic variables to help understand park access. So do we have transportation? Do we have other issues with access to parks and recreation pursuits? The second big takeaway is looking at outdoor recreation and nature-based tourism participation. Broadly speaking, we are experiencing massive increases of folks going outside, really during and post the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're seeing that as a sustained increase. So this is an absolute trend that we anticipate to stay stable and or continue to rise, and the RDCK is also, of course, experiencing those increases in visitation and use in our parks and trails. Really focusing on that alignment with national, provincial, and regional policy. So we have policies across the country and the province that really support increasing access to nature. We know that parks provide a multitude of benefits, both for us humans, for our physical, mental, and emotional well-being, as well as really important climate change mitigation outcomes. So we have policies across the country guiding the increase in development of parks parks and trails, as well as the maintenance and ensuring that these places are meeting the needs of community members and that they are safe, inclusive, and accessible. And then finally, the background report allows us to really understand, like I said, the spatial dimensions of the parks and trail system and recognizing where some of those gaps are. So of course, this won't come as a surprise to you folks, recognizing that there are gaps in the current system, and specifically looking at areas C, B, and the Creston region, as well as I mentioned, thinking about our rural residents and access to parks and trails within the regional district. So those are kind of those key takeaways from the background report. Would it be helpful? We're going to move into the engagement. Would it be helpful if I pause here if there's any questions, or do you want me to move through both report overviews and then have time for questions, whichever the directors would like?
Yes, thank you. We do have a couple questions, so we'll go to those couple questions and then we'll jump into the second part. Thanks. So first one, Director Vandenberg.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, CJ. My question is around the clarity of this report, this work. So is this an assessment of current water access points, or will it identify potential water access points? Is one of my two questions.
Thank you. Yeah. So at this stage, we are just looking at the current assessment of the inventory of current water access, current parks and trails. We will not be making recommendations on specific areas, rather on those classifications of what communities need. So what types of water access, along which water bodies, that type of thing, as opposed to a specific recommendation of this area. However, RDCK staff will be empowered to use the information that we've gathered to make some of those decisions based on the strategy for those specific sites.
Great. Supplemental, if I may.
Yep.
In your assessment, or in your plan, your phase 3 refers to working group November 18th. That tells me it's something that's upcoming. There's something that another engagement process, including presumably us, on that date. Can you confirm?
Sure. So that working group is comprised of Director Lockwood, Director Tierney, and Director Hagenrath. And they are, as well as RDCK staff. And so that meeting is with those folks specifically, and we'll be providing the draft of these reports for them to have the time to review and engage with in this conversation, so that then I can make those edits and share them back with the larger commission once they are finalized.
Great, thank you.
Just going to pause. Pearl, did you notice that Director Davidoff signed on? At 9:00.
Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me know.
Great. Yeah. Over to Chair Watson.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm kind of leading off Director Vandenberg's question on the final report. I noted in the bottom of your presentation, it said the final report would go to the board, the RDCK board, and I'd just like to ask either to Clara or through to staff, would it not go back to all recreation for a full review and a deeper conversation than we generally get to have at board? That's my first question. And the second one is related to water access points. So maybe I'll just break those up into Chair McFadden. Okay, so that's my first question.
That'd be great. Yeah, Claire or Joe, who would like to answer that question? Is it coming back to ORAC, or is it going straight to the board?
Yeah, through the chair. So we can do it either way. And that's something that we'll talk with the working group about on November 18th. But I understand the point that if we bring it back to ORAC, we can actually create some time so that everyone can have a conversation.
I think that's probably the thought there. Thanks. Over to Chair Watson.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that, Joe. So my second question, and I think I know the answer, Clara, but Clara Jane, sorry, I just want to clarify. So all along Kootenay Lake, we have tons of water access points that are under the jurisdiction of Ministry of Transportation that they don't manage. I'm assuming that is not a part of this process, and we're only addressing RDCK already under license of occupation points of access. Is that correct?
It's correct in that we cannot make strategy recommendations for, as you mentioned, all of those MODI sort of right of ways, but there are opportunities to investigate where there might be community use happening or areas of need that could be investigated in the future for development. So again, not specific sites, but how we might evaluate some of those unmanaged sites moving forward, and a framework and a system to allow the RDCK to investigate water access needs moving forward.
May I have one supplemental? Or actually two. And my guess is Joe might want to talk about the upline, but we have the community of Schroeder, which has huge congestion for everybody moving over to water access only communities on the east side of Kootenay Lake at the north end. And they for years have been trying to get some support, but I've really struggled because it's not a park access. It's actually that there's subdivision approvals that were done under MODI before they had to prove actual access for their vehicles. So I think it falls outside of Parks and Rec, but for Area D, it is one area that has huge congestion. And of course, MODI doesn't manage those. So I just wanted to flag that as possible a follow-up conversation with either yourself or Joe or whoever would like. So I guess a comment. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, I'm very familiar with the shorter creek that we're talking about, where the resort is, and then all that parking area that's right across from it. Is that correct?
Yeah, she's not.
Yeah. My wife goes over to Fried Creek, so yes, I know that that's a very congested area. So yes, we can definitely discuss that.
And thank you. I actually forgot that Fried Creek, there is a huge park they're using that access for. So yes, there is a park connection.
Great. Okay. Director McLaren-Coe.
Thank you, Chair. And through the chair, I just had a comment and maybe a question as well. I noticed in the key takeaways, there's the gaps identified around in the Crescent area. But if you look at the map of RDCK parks and recreation assets or outdoor assets, they're all in the Aspen Area K. And I was wondering if there is if you can disaggregate the geographical location of where the information was taken or the surveys, because I would suspect that people in the Nacaspen Area K area probably didn't answer any surveys, or few of them did, because we just have no assets up here. So I was wondering if Clara could speak to where the information came from. Thank you.
Claire Jane?
Yeah, thanks. I can speak a little bit. So some of the engagement data that I'll go through in the next slide or in the next section, we did have representation from obviously across the RDCK, and I do have a breakdown of participation in terms of location, and yes, you are correct that there was lower participation from Nacasp and Area K. There were 24 folks total, so there is definitely that issue. And sorry, there are other gaps. That was just one gap in the system that we highlighted. So the report does outline, and we've actually have it mapped and through our GIS system to look at some of those. And we've mapped as well population access per 1 kilometer. And so that's actually mapped, and that'll be outlined in more detail in the report to really spatially represent some of those gaps.
Great, good. Okay, sorry, we just have a phone ringing in here, and I'm just gonna wait 1 second so that no one online misses anything for the next question. Are we good?
It should be
It's like the RDCK phone that we don't know how to turn off. So anyways, are we good?
yes.
Okay, I think we're good. Over to Director Chapman.
Thanks, Chair. I think my question was partially answered. My concern was gaps where we have a lot of trails. For example, East Shore Trail and Bike Association has some 30 kilometers of trails, none of them under the RDCK. So are these captured under the inventory? Were there conversations from people, say, from that group as part of this process? So maybe I have to wait 10 minutes, I might hear that, but there's a lot of, I think the comment was about equitable access to parks and trails. People have a lot more access to parks and trails than what our system suggests, but way more. The other question is whether or not governance was discussed, because in these areas where community groups have established and maintained, with help from RDCK, might have been Rec 9 money, Area A, E, and C, Area A discretionary community development grants, they've had help from RDCK to develop these trails, but they want to maintain some say in what happens. So has this study, these conversations, included anything around governance, whether we have all elected sort of governing bodies who make decisions, or whether there's a strong preference for community groups to maintain commissions and committees where they have a voice, the direct voice to the board? So the one maybe you could answer now, was governance part of the conversation yet, or is that down the road?
Claire Jane?
Fantastic. That's a great question. So to your first point around other types of parks and trails. So absolutely, the background report details that there is, of course, a plethora of protected areas, ecological reserves, provincial parks, rec sites and trails, community parks, municipal parks, that the system within the RDCK is much larger than the regional district's offering of parks and trails. So we, of course, acknowledge that. However, in saying that, the focus, of course, of this strategy is on the RDCK owned and managed assets. And so we will focus on the fact that there are differences in what's available to community members across the regional district as it relates to regional district owned and managed and operated assets in comparison to others. But that recognition that this is a system, parks, trails, water access, and outdoor recreation broadly is comprised of a system with multiple land managers as well as community partners. And so we want to be complementary with each other when we're thinking about a plan. We don't need, the regional district system doesn't need to be everything to everyone, because we have other assets that provide those opportunities and those resources to community members. So that's definitely outlined in both the background report and, of course, will be highlighted in the plan. And then to your second question, specifically, we haven't, I won't get to talk too much in detail about those governance structures until we get further into those recommendations in the plan. But I can tell you, in thinking about best practices and jurisdictional review, there is absolutely opportunities for continued partnership with community-based organizations, and there is a lot of value in, as you already pointed out, the example of East Shore Community Group building trails and maintaining trails. But we also see with that there are risks and liabilities to government when we are solely relying on volunteers. We know that the trends in volunteering tell us that folks are, as our population ages, our younger populations aren't actually as engaged in the same ways. So not to say that folks aren't interested in volunteering, but we tend to see more folks interested in one-off events as opposed to longer commitments, shorter time intervals. And then really the big thing is thinking about trail sustainability. So we have in this province and in this country have been fortunate to have many passionate outdoor enthusiasts who take up the commitment and volunteering around trail development and trail maintenance. But we also know that trail sustainability, when it is not done in a systematic and planned way, can actually be detrimental. So we see unsustainable trails being developed or put in places that might not be the most appropriate based on now, especially climate change impacts, wildlife corridors, residential expansions and developments. And so we really want to think, how are we working with community groups and volunteer groups as the regional district, as the land managers, to ensure that our parks and trails are sustainable and providing safe community experiences for your residents. So that being said, basically, we see a real opportunity to work with community groups and volunteer groups, but also our recommendation and best practices suggest that there is definitely an opportunity for governments to think about MOUs or volunteer coordinator positions, more governance around the management and engagement with volunteers and community groups. Does that help answer that question? Sorry, it was a bit broad. My answer was a bit broad.
Nope, thank you.
If I can, yes, you guys are obviously thinking about all the right things. Some of these trails are very high risk in my view, and we would not want to take them on. But there's probably across the regional district a few hundred kilometers that we could probably best manage, because the pressure now is to put more and more regional district money into these and maybe less volunteer time. So yeah, that's good. We will get there, I guess. May take a few years. Thanks.
Great. Director David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Comment and then a question. This is really good. I like where we're going. I like the answers, just what you just gave Director Jackman. So through the chair, that's good. You're thinking about all the right things. I'm going to speak.
Director David.
Yeah.
Sorry, your sound is breaking up. I'm not sure why. Is it us or is it him?
Okay.
Try muting.
Okay, we're going to try mute. Okay, we'll try muting here too. Start again. We've heard most of it. It just is breaking up a bit.
Yeah, I stopped my video, and if you mute, I think we should be fine. Is that better? Hello?
Sorry, we muted. It's actually not. I'm not sure.
We get a soundtrack from someone else.
Maybe. Is everyone else muted? I think.
I just unmuted, and you might want to just try and mute the boardroom while Andy's speaking to see if that makes a difference, but it seems to be Andy's audio when he's speaking.
Yeah, we did mute, and it didn't make much of a difference here. Okay, let's try one more time, Director.
Yeah, I'm going to just try. Okay, is that better?
Much more scratchy.
We are just having sound issues today. It's pretty scratchy. We can hear most of what you're saying, so if you make it concise, I'm sure that Claire Jane or staff can hear enough to answer your question.
Okay. I'm speaking to Area I specifically. We have no access to the Kootenay River, no public motorized access to the Kootenay River from the confluence of the Kootenay and Columbia all the way, actually zero, all the way to the Slocan Pool. There is no public access to the Kootenay River. And we have one access on the other side of the Kootenay River, and that's in Glade. So it's a choke point for us. And our fire departments are also looking to put dry standpipes on the Kootenay River on this side of on the west side of the river. And we have been stymied because of MOT requirements like McHardy Road. We used to have access at the end of Shiracres Road, and that's gone. We have there's a place in Thrums there's a road right away that goes right to the river, but that's not been developed. So that's both for recreation and fire protection service purposes. And our Terry's Fire Department said they would really love to have that access to be able to have a dry standpipe. So while we're doing this work, I think there are natural points. If we discuss it with you, if you contact, I think each director can tell you exactly where they would like to see access and not to see access, and that might help inform your work. So is that something that you are prepared to do?
Okay. Director David, if you want to mute, and I'll see if I can capture what you said. You're pretty choppy. I think your question was around talking to directors around specific access where they see it fit, because you struggle with access to the Kootenay River in your area, except in Glade, and your fire department as well is looking for access to that. Am I correct? That's what you're looking for answers to?
Yes.
Okay. Claire Jane, do you have any thoughts on the project?
Yeah, and I might also ask Carrie and Joe if they want to add anything. So specifically, we are not going to be recommending specific sites, rather frameworks. And a system to be able to evaluate sites in the future. So the strategy itself will provide the tools for staff to make those recommendations to directors moving forward, or vice versa for communities to put those forward. That is my understanding, but again, wanted to see if Joe or Carrie might have different recommendations for me.
Yeah, no, through the chair, I'll take that one. So I think it's an interesting conversation, because at the beginning there was a little bit of consternation that we didn't want to have specific sites identified and increase public expectation of what might be provided. So I think what CJ's in particular pointing out here, some of the tools that we don't have, for example, are one of the things that CJ discussed was this classification piece. And that classification piece is very important, because what the classification piece will do once we get that formalized is say that if it's a water access point, the classification of it as a water access point means these types of things. So for example, it may not mean a washroom. So that kind of clarity to the community and to our development practice, our costing, how we develop those things, that will all then get compartmentalized, because so many times what we've noticed is without those kinds of structures around how we do this, we can get off on the tangents that either increase the scope of something or underscope it in some cases. So that's the particular piece. But I think what Director Davidoff in particular is pointing out that's important, and sometimes we forget, even though we're a regional district, is that sometimes there's multiple benefits to certain sites. So for example, a water access point that might be tied into a place where a fire truck can fill up the tender. So those kinds of things, so that it's a good thing for us to consider in the information, so that we know that might actually tip something to a higher priority, that type of consideration. So I think that's where that comment can come in. But I think what's really important with the plan that RC is working on is this classification piece, and trying to create some scope around development. Because I think we hear that a lot. We want to have more access points. We're concerned about cost. So that those classifications will help us understand those costs when we're talking about access points and those other kinds of things, or even the parks. Right?
Director Davidoff, you said you have a supplemental. I'll try and catch what you have to say. It's pretty choppy.
Yeah. I'm just going to say that we're investing a lot of money in this work. I think it's really important that we address those multiple use, multiple purpose, community beneficial. Wildfire is a huge issue for us. Having dry standpipes is a huge benefit for us. So I think it would be a shame if we didn't incorporate that work into this study, because we're not going to do this again for years. So I think we need to look at the scope of this work then, if that's what it takes. But it would be a shame to see this really comprehensive effort not include what Joe just summarized and what I've raised. And our Terry's Fire Department is really looking forward to some water access point that could be multifunctional for other recreational purposes as well. Thank you.
I think the boardroom's muted still.
Oh, sorry, I forgot.
Okay.
You're good.
We're good? Can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Okay. Go for it, Director Davidoff.
Yeah. have you muted so they don't hear me speak. Anyways, most of the points have been covered by the former directors, but the water standpipes, I've got 4 fire departments in my area. That is a main concern. Providing maybe tools how we can address to get water standpipes or access to the water, especially along the Spokane River. And Ministry of Environment are putting too many roadblocks in there for us to get access to the water. So some tools for us to be able to do that. And the other part about it is Ministry of Highways. Some tools to work with the Ministry of Highways, especially during the summer when we have river rafting on the Spokane River. And most of the people park along the bridges and there's a traffic congestion. So an issue like that, I'm not going to be specific to what areas, but there are a lot of areas there that can be worked with Ministry of Highways somehow to provide ample parking, because the congestion, when it happens, if we have an emergency vehicle will not be able to get through there. So it is a problem. And the other one is that we have the Rail-to Trail, and there are access points to the river from the Rail-to Trail. And that's a nonprofit organization that runs that Rail-to Trail. So maybe working with that community group, looking at access points to the river along there. And the last comment is, I think our regional parks that we have, the Crescent Valley Beach Park, the Linlow Park has been very good in developing access points to the river.
Great. Thank you. Some more comments then. I think I didn't hear a question in there, correct? We're good? No? Okay, good. Director Page.
All I was going to say is when we did our service review and generated our inventory of the various assets, who is owning, who is managing, I hope we come out of this process with something similar. What clubs are producing what assets, potentially what the state of a facility index score or equivalent would be. If we know if they're low risk, I would probably hedge away from calling something high risk if it's unknown, but have a category of risk or liability. And if we have planning that's in place so that we know it's being managed properly, we can market it as low. If we don't know, then question mark. Just so that at the end of the day, we have a nice solid amount of data line by line that tells us what's out there. And I see Joe nodding, so he knows what I'm talking about.
Claire, Jane, or Joe, are we good? You got that info? Good. Director Lawford.
Just one question, CJ, is you spoke that you guys got to all the parks but one. Can the group know what one you did not get to?
Yes, absolutely. So we were there during February and we drove up the road to Glacier Creek, and it was unfortunately just too dangerous by the time we got up the road. But Carrie's given me a really detailed overview of the site, and I had been to almost all of the sites before as well. So this wasn't, it was just a good opportunity for us to document everything.
Thank you. Director Vandenberg.
Through the chair. So in this, to follow up, Keith kind of twigged a thought for me. This is an inventory asset report in sense, but will it be broad to include not only RDCK and public opportunities like CJ you talked about, Modi, but private as well? So it would be kind of an all-encompassing report. Doesn't mean that you have to go into detail about it, but at least it is captured and categorized that way. Would that be part of the scope?
So anything that we have access to from public data, as well as data provided by the RDCK, we are reporting on. So if there are inventory of assets, for example, in Nature Conservancy land, we don't have access to. I couldn't tell you where the benches and washrooms are on other lands. I can tell you through our detailed analysis where those sites are. But within the scope of this work, the focus on infrastructure and assets were those owned or managed within the RDCK. And I will say that those do also include some municipal municipal parks and recreation assets that will be highlighted. But if it's not within the data provided from the RDCK, we don't have that in the scope of this work. And so that would need to be a separate conversation.
Director Watson. Oh, Director Vandenberg, do you have a supplemental?
No, that's good. Thank you. It's unfortunate though, because this could be a very interesting report, all encompassing, but I see that it does have its restrictions.
Director Watson.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry, I had assumed when we had missed a park, it was probably Glacier Creek because it's pretty up there. I just wanted to note that obviously with the fires this summer, there's been a lot of impact to Glacier Creek. So it's something that when we get to our budget conversations, I'm sure I'll get an update, but I believe that it may have been a blessing that you couldn't get there because that might be a different story now in terms of needs and assets and things like that. So I don't know if I have a question in there. I think, again, it's another one that has a lot more details to it. It's very well used and it's surrounded by rec sites and trails. And there's a lot of issues regarding, no cell service, no ambulance. It's very difficult to access. And there's a lot of accidents, unfortunately, which isn't just Glacier Creek. It's all the rec sites and trails and the fact that Duncan Lake becomes pretty much a sand pit. So it has a lot of high activity on it. So I'll just stop there. It's a big conversation and I could have guessed that one. So no surprise. And hopefully this summer, that delay means that you can actually review it with everything that occurred this summer. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have one more and then we'll go on to the second half. Director Page.
Okay, I'll try to do this succinctly. Picking up on what Vandenberg has said, we're just going to bounce off each other for a bit. We have something like Whitewater, private. We have aspirations for something at the golf course, which talks about public access and winter opportunities. And I'm wondering within the confines of these recommendations, do we perhaps come out of this process with a way that private organizations can provide us with geospatial information on what's available as we incorporate it into our larger mapping exercise? Where Whitewater may say, these are the day trails, this is how you get to them, this is where we've got parks and washrooms. We may not go collect it or do that work, but we may be available or provide within our framework the ability to bring in private data, import it into our geospatial mapping so we're aware of how that ecosystem and continuum of regional parks and trails assets interconnects.
Claire Jane, I see you nodding yes.
Yeah, I would say there are opportunities to increase knowledge across them. But again, just thinking about what was in scope for this project, we haven't been able to provide those maps. In saying that, it is a conversation, of course, that we can have, that if that's something that is of interest, we can look at what that would look like or what that would take. We do have access to trails through open space data, which is through Strava, Metro, and street mapping. However, again, currently the report is focused on the detailed mapping of RDCK owned and managed assets. So regional parks, regional trails. That's what's included in the report as of now based on the scope of work.
I'll let Joe answer a bit. I think we got most of what you said. You're breaking up pretty bad. Apparently we have issues with sound today.
I think it's internet.
Yeah, I think it might be our internet doing things. Joe, do you want to add anything to that?
Through the chair, I think parks and trails in that outdoor space is gigantic. Like it's gigantic. We have a fairly narrow budget for this project. And so it really meant that we had to prioritize. And I think prioritize in particular the things that we struggle with in the regional district. So I think those are the items that we have that we have concentrated on. I do want to put this plug in though. Some of these ideas are a reason why we need a robust GIS system. just saying. I think Gita would get upset with me if I didn't put that plug in. But I think, CJ, I think we've heard these things, and I think we can definitely maybe have that discussion, like what are the things that we're hearing that we might be missing, and then maybe we can bring that back as a discussion for all rec to have. But, I think on the board, a number of times through the year, some board members will remember there was a proposal to create an REC-wide trail service to fund trail groups. That was, I don't know, maybe a decade ago, maybe a little more than that. So lots of these big ideas have happened. I think some of the fundamental pieces that we're missing, though, are the kind of the bedrock for this system, and that's like the work that CJ is primarily concentrating on. But I think we've heard these things, and when we get to that group meeting in a few weeks, we'll definitely incorporate that, and I'm sure the directors that are on that working group are hearing it as well.
Great. Okay, Director Davidoff, and then we'll go on to the second half of CJ's presentation.
I would have no problem committing $5,000 or $10,000 of Area Community Works funds if it meant we end up with an access to the river on the west side of the Kootenay River, and we get standpipes. None. And I think it qualifies as community planning under that category. So if it's more money you need to expand the scope, right now I'm saying $5,000 is a done deal from Area.
Thanks, Director Davidoff. I'll let staff take that. Director Jackman, is it important before we go on to the second half?
I think it's important to understand when Joe talks about how big this is. For each water access traditional use study, we paid, or we had another party pay, $35,000 per site for one small element of beginning to look at a water access point. When Joe says this is big dollars. $5,000 won't get our foot in the door to begin to understand an individual site. So I agree with Joe. This is a very big exercise once you broaden it beyond where we already have any form of jurisdiction.
Great. What I'm hearing is that we recognize we're not capturing everything with this so far, and that there's going to be more studies. And Director Davidoff, I think staff took your point that there's some real need there, and you're willing to commit some stuff to try and get it done. So we're going to move on to the second half of CJ's presentation. So let's let Joe pull it up. Okay, I think we're good.
Sorry, just a moment.
Maybe not. Never mind. 1 second.
I didn't just disconnect.
I think no, I'm still on it, so.
Yeah.
I think I pulled somehow, I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. Joe has disconnected the main computer from the meeting. So 1 second. I believe everyone has it in these.
I don't know if they can hear you.
Yeah, they can.
You can hear me, right? Online? Yeah, they can hear me, which means we shouldn't be disconnected because I thought myself muted. So somewhere in the room is still connected.
The board is still connected. I can see you guys through the board.
Yeah, it's up at top. Do you see the top there? That little bar? That's
that's the video.
okay.
Sorry, help me with that.
Sarah is having to try and help them. Does everyone have access to her presentation?
First one, did you reply to what I said?
I got one from Gerard.
Yeah, I saw that. And I got one from her.
Thank you.
I wasn't going to do anything without sending it to you first.
People didn't catch that.
Great. Okay, we're good. Over to you, CJ.
Thank you. So in this part, I just wanted to provide some overview of the engagement. So I thought that you folks would really appreciate seeing the scope, the breadth of the engagement that we were able to capture over the last number of months. So we started with public engagement in June, in which we had an online public survey available for all RDCK community members, as well as interested parties, visitors. And so this was hosted through the Engage BC RDCK Bang the Table website. So we had more than 1,600 folks take this survey. It was on the longer side. Remember that we are trying to capture information about, you have 27 regional parks and trails. And as it was mentioned earlier, there are more than 260 water access points. Not that we at all identified specific points, but just recognizing the breadth of your system. We did have a lot of questions to get through. So we were actually really happy with this participation. We ended up with 665 completed surveys, but we use all available data in the analysis. So any time that there were answers to a question, even if you if folks didn't complete the survey, there's still valuable data in their input. So extensive participation across the regional district in terms of that public survey. We recognize that everybody wants to complete an online survey. Again, it was also a longer survey. So we really focused on this ability to triangulate our data and using multiple different sources and engagements types. So not only did we have this public survey, but we also had a number of community partner groups specifically were available, were invited to participate in a separate online survey. So these are folks like our trail organizations, the Nelson Cycling Club, Creston ATV Club, to name a few. There were a large number of groups and organizations that participated in this online survey specifically for our community partners. We then conducted a number of in-depth interviews with municipalities, with our tourism operators, with Selkirk College, Trans-Canada Trails, number of really sort of relevant and committed partners to the regional district's parks, trails, and water access. And then, as I mentioned, when we're thinking about the public and the opportunity to engage, an online survey might not be the way that folks are preferably engaging. So then we provided sounding boards. So these were foam core boards that were posted at the Nelson District Community Center, the Creston Community Center, as well as the Castlegar Community Center, and then as well at some designated trailheads. And so those received 87 unique individual comments. And then I was also there in early June, and I was in person at various parks and trails across the region, as well as at those rec center campuses. And in that process, some of you might have seen me. I had 8 giant panels, and I spoke to more than 200 people, received individual unique comments, as well as used some different forms of engagement tools, sort of like a dotmocracy, if you will, with little stickers where folks could indicate some of their preferences and decisions around or preferences around certain activities, locations, types of infrastructure. And then finally, we had an online web map where folks could actually, using spatial representation of their ideas and comments, drop pins and or draw lines available on our web map. And that received more than 1,600 individual contributions. And so that looks in the form of comments as well as likes and or dislikes. So it is anonymous, and you can agree with comments, disagree with comments, or reply to comments. So in total, we really feel like we had a robust engagement process that really just finished wrapping up those interviews a number of weeks ago. And as I mentioned, we're also working directly with Indigenous communities and First Nations. And we don't have that represented here because those are ongoing conversations and relationships that we're working with Indigenous communities. So that's kind of by the numbers, and then I'll just present the key findings before we take some questions. So there are many, many things that this engagement provided us, some really fantastic insights, and I'm not going to cover them all here. And as I mentioned earlier, you will be getting this report in a number of weeks. But the key things that I wanted to highlight, again, public access to water and beaches is a real top priority. We saw that time and time again in all of the different various engagement styles, whether it was through the survey, through in person, or through those comments. Again, highlighting some of those gaps and recognizing, of course, too, the geographical representation of who was engaging, why we might not see some of the gaps, as we already talked about in the Cusp and Area K, versus there was a really strong participation with Creston, Area B and Area C. Lots of folks wanting to come online or come in person and tell me those gaps. And so, of course, we explain that in the report, that this is also a representation of who we spoke to. And then the focus and the purpose of our system. So we asked folks, what should regional district parks and trails really be providing to community members? And there was an overwhelming sense that the RDCK should be providing nature-based recreation. And so when we think about what parks do and what they provide, of course, there is an ecological component, a conservation component, and a climate change mitigation component. But residents overwhelmingly felt that this opportunity to connect with nature and engage in nature-based recreation was at the forefront of what they wanted to see from RDCK, parks, trails, and water access. We've talked a little bit already today about the value of partnerships and community-based organizations and some of those key trends for ensuring success in those relationships, but ensuring that those continue and ways to support our volunteers and our community groups from the regional district were highlighted. And then our last two were really about the values. So folks, overwhelmingly, this was more than 94% of participants indicated that parks, trails, and water access improve their mental and their physical well-being. So there is a really high value placed on these things for your residents. And then more than 2/3 of residents indicated that they would support additional investment in regional parks, trails, and water access. And so I just wanted to make these key findings that I thought were of the most interest to you folks today. But like I said, there are other things that you will see come out in the report, and of course, more detail on all of those. But those are the key takeaways that I wanted to highlight. And yeah, happy to take questions on this engagement side of things. Oh, I guess the last slide, we might as well go to the last slide because it just indicates the next steps, and then we can move on from the presentation into questions. So just wanting to indicate, as we move forward from the background report and the engagement, we are working on articulating the mission, visions, and goals. This was a key feature of this work and of the scope of this project, is developing and actually writing those mission, visions, and goals, which will help us define how we actually approach the draft plan. Once we have that draft plan, we will be going back to public engagement. So there is a phase 2 to this work, so that the public, as well as all of our community engaged partners and our First Nations partners, have the opportunity to provide feedback on the draft plan itself, which will of course use all of the information gathered in the background report and the engagement. And so that plan will go into phase 2 public engagement before we provide that final strategy to the working group, and then ultimately to the All Recreation Commission, as Joe articulated earlier today. And those are all the slides I have. So now, yeah, happy to take questions on the engagement or next steps of the process.
Great, thank you. Just waiting to be unmuted so everyone can hear. Yeah, I've got a few questions. So Director or Chair Watson?
Yeah, thank you. You guys can hear okay? I think so.
Yeah, we can hear you.
On the engagement process for those rural parks, I'm going to specify the ones in D, which is Glacier and Lardo. Lardo has a lot of congestion as well. I'm just curious, since you have a next phase, and my assumption from what you had indicated was there was no in-person engagement for either of those parks. They were more concentrated at the rec centers in the south end of the region. I'm wondering if it would be possible to request that you attend one of their fall fairs. Because the online engagement is definitely not, it's an opportunity, but it's not the same. And we've lost traction with some of the commissions up there, but there's still a lot of interest. So we need to get creative. There's 2 fall fairs. Oh, they may have already passed. I'm so sorry. Anyways, I'd like to see some on the ground or direct engagement with those communities. It's not super hard because there's not a lot of people. It's just geographically large. Thank you.
CJ, do you have a response for that?
I would prefer to ask Joe in terms of scope. We are happy to provide services that are needed. I just would need clarity from Joe in terms of scope changes and how we proceed with additional engagement.
Is that something you need to take away to answer, or do you have an answer for?
Yeah, I would say right now, CJ, just our projected completion of the project, I just can't remember right now.
January, ideally.
Yeah, so like the intent is that we're coming kind of to the closed side of the project. So it's like things like further engagement at fall fairs for this project probably isn't something that's possible or feasible without a change in scope. But I think the directors that are on the steering committee have heard that, and so we can definitely have that discussion on the 18th.
The hearing steering committee has heard. Chair Watson?
Yeah, my supplemental is just that I do raise concerns when we're focusing engagement in person at the larger rec centers in the south end of the region, when we have to also be able to adequately engage those in the north where there is remote parks, that there's a lot of questions around or interest. And so I feel like if you did mention there's another engagement process. And so that's where I was suggesting that there's some direct engagement occurring. I wouldn't consider it a scope change. I would just say that honestly, some of it was inadequate in terms of really capturing the full district. So however that can occur, I would appreciate it because it's informative to 2 very highly used parks that have some issues. Thank you.
Great. I think the staff and the steering committee have heard, and I think they'll look into it. Great. Director Popov?
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the engagement you've done, I'd like to commend you on that. That's a lot of engagement process that you went through. But from what I take a look at, as in hearing the comments today from directors, have you engaged any of the directors at all? Talked to directors? Because, and the reason for that is we as directors field all the concerns of our residents by phone calls, etc. And I think would be possibly a good action to take is to engage some of the directors or all of the directors with different parks and water access problems that we all have. And then that way I would feel comfortable that you've done the full engagement process.
Joe or CJ, do you want to talk about scope of project and where that fits in?
Through the chair, I think and CJ, just correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the engagement with directors is things like this. So are we suggesting like a director survey? Is that the piece that we're?
If you want to respond, whatever tool will work best for directors. A director survey. Generally, surveys are geared to specific questions, but an interview with each director would help us guide this process and what we see as our residents' concerns, and they will more than likely be a little bit different than what your surveys show, because as Director Watson mentioned here, is online engagement is great, but more in-person engagement is far better. And it's pretty hard to go out to every town hall and have a town hall meeting to get the residents to engage or whatever. But I believe we as directors can provide a lot of good information and are the concerns that we hear from our residents.
Just, maybe through the chair, is there a feeling from the directors that you would like to see something like that added, just for the steering committee's knowledge? Is that something that we want to prioritize as a discussion on the 18th, is potentially individual director interviews?
Am I allowed in this format of a meeting to take an informal poll and see if that's a consensus, or do I actually have to?
It would be great if we can, or else we can also follow up with an email just to see. The one thing about having it done right here is that you're all getting to understand what that might be.
Great. My concern, I'll just say it right up front, is that we're going to have 15 people wanting to speak. I think it might be Director David. Oh, David, are you unmuted? There we go. Thank you. Yeah, my concern obviously is that we are opening for an agenda that we need to get through, a can of worms here. So I'm wondering if we're going to pause and do it through email.
Sure.
And they can let you know if there's a consensus from the directors, just a yes or no, if we want, if you would like a phone call on specific things, because there may not be everyone that does, but maybe some do. With that, I'm going to leave that there because I'm seeing some say yes on chat already. I just want to make sure we get through our agenda today. So I'm going to move on with my list.
So
and I'll
through
leave
the
it.
chair, I will have Jenna send out.
That'd be great. Excellent. And then everyone can give their response to that. Okay, Director Weatherhead.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you through the chair to CJ. On this study, I went into the study a little bit, and I noted that a lot of the Area K residents were making comments about waterways on the Arrow Lakes, which of course is owned and operated by the BC Hydro, among some other places of note. I just am curious as to what was the communication to at the beginning of the survey, because I didn't do the survey, but as to, I saw a map highlighting all of the RDCK recreation. Was that the only way? Because I feel like my area has a lot of misconceptions about what's RDCK and what's BC Hydro and what is managed and tenured by a society. And so, you know, I mean, it's kind of a moot point actually in terms of you're not going to educate everybody in my area. I don't expect that. But I just wondered what the communication to specify that, yeah, we just don't have any RDCK assets in Area K. Thank you.
CJ or Joe, do you want to answer, Director Weatherhead?
I would just say that on the map, you just highlighted, as you said, which assets were RDCK owned or managed assets. And that was the scope of, we provide the map so that folks can give us their feedback, because there might be opportunities to engage with partners at the provincial level to say that there is a real desire for access in this place. And we have seen that to be really successful in previous examples over the years, where even though something might be managed by Modi or parks or rec sites and trails, that there are opportunities. So we allow community members to give us their feedback on specific locations, knowing that they are not necessarily currently in the scope of RDCK owned and managed assets.
Thank you. Can I supplemental to that? If I may, with the chair. Were there any of the Area K respondents? I didn't see any that related to the actual RDCK assets in other areas. So does that just kind of conclude that any input from my area was not relevant to the study?
No, so we'll report on those recommendations and that feedback from community members. It is all captured in there. And again, it's thinking about, as we look forward to the next 10 years, what are those future opportunities and what are those needs of community members?
Good. Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you through the chair. The question is probably directed more so to Joe. So the results of this study, will it then inform or enhance our 2020 Parks and Rec master plan work that we did with Crescent A, B, and C?
Through the chair, yes, all of the master plans. So, in fact, this was work I think that was identified in almost every one of the master plans that needed to take place, of the ones that we've done recently.
Thanks, Joe.
So through the chair, I lied to CJ. I we put CJ at the beginning of, because I believe that she actually has other things, maybe even have another meeting that she needs to go to. If we could give her an opportunity to gracefully leave if she needs to, because this has been a lot longer than what I had told her to anticipate. Sorry, CJ.
CJ, do you need to leave?
I can stay for like maybe another 15 minutes. Is that
okay? I have two last people on the list, and then hopefully we'll get through them and we should be able to let you go. Director McLaren-Pope.
Thank you, Chair. And through the chair to either CJ or to staff, I'm just wondering if you can speak to any potential bias in the methodology of the receiving responses, such as if you're getting responses from people who are using recreation assets, is it possible that they would be biased towards supporting those assets? Thanks.
Yes. CJ or Joe?
So what I would say is that, sorry, through the chair, so definitely you could say that when CJ was doing some of the pop-ups and she was in and close to parks, that was probably could be the case. But what I would suggest is that every single one of our master plans has actually, whether it be the Nelson plan, the Area H, Silverton, New Denver's Slocan master plan, the Castlegar IJ master plan, the Creston ABC one being the most recent. Every single one of those plans have said, in that broader consultation that wasn't just about parks, have said residents would support some kind of improvement to the park system and that they highly value parks. So that's been consistent across all engagements, but definitely to the point, like when we're in those locations, like at those parks. So the part of that piece of being at some of the parks was to get that engagement from those people who were using it. So definitely, absolutely, that would be a bias from those people.
Director Pagan.
Thank you. I like that because they say they highly value it. I sometimes wonder, let's put a monetary value on it. How much would you pay to go to this park if you had to pay? I know in Oregon, for example, if you want to use some of the parks, you can buy a yearly pass and things like that. But they do put a monetary value on. Here's a viewing area. If you really want to go through this viewing area and go down to the beach below, it's going to cost you $1. That kind of thing. No, I'm not suggesting we do it, but I think that when you ask people, realize what's the monetary value and how much are you willing to pay? If you'd like to make this cliff into a beach, would you be willing to pay $25 each visitor for a year or something to let it happen? I mean, because I love it. I think the value is great. How much, what do you mean by value? We know exactly what it is when we go visit a rec center, how much it costs to play hockey or how much it costs to play basketball. How much does it actually cost to take a trail or to, because that also has a monetary value. And I suggest that somehow we think of a way in which we could perhaps let other people put the monetary value on it, because it isn't free. It really isn't. And I'm not suggesting that it be changed, but I am suggesting that people think about the fact that when you say we want this trail developed, it's going to cost you an extra $10 a year on your recreation taxes.
I don't know if you have, go ahead.
I do actually have, we specifically did ask that in this survey. So we asked folks if they would support the a tax levy, in which 66% of individuals said that they either somewhat support or extremely likely to support a tax levy. And then we also asked specifically how much money would they be willing to pay in that tax levy. And then again, we saw more than 2/3 of respondents indicate that they'd be willing to pay $25 or more per year on a special tax levy for parks, trails, and water access. So not that that gives us, an indication of everyone, of course, recognizing we've already talked about the limitations of the sample, but just some knowledge and awareness of the fact that your residents are indicating that they have some willingness to support a tax levy of $25 or more to support parks, trails, and water access.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, I think, we definitely do try to have those questions. I think even last night, we just held a public engagement at Terry's Hall for our Council Guide project, which we very much did a lot of effort in trying to let people know what something might cost. And lots of the comments there, and I don't know what the other directors that were there at that meeting heard, but I had a lot of comments about increasing access to parks and trails in the rural area. So that was definitely something that I heard last night. But it always is, you're absolutely right, it always is that problem. People always want something, but you need to compare it and make sure that they understand the cost of what they're asking.
Thank you. Supplementary, and I'd like to point, I know there are a number of directors on this board who really are complaining about and worried about increasing taxes. And you can't do one without the other.
Director Lockwood.
Thank you. One is maybe two comments. The comment on director's feedback. I think that what I remember is when we discussed developing this working group was to take that away from all the directors. That I'm worried we're not going to get as much information from our consultation if we now expect the directors to have individual, out of 20, I don't know how many will want it, but out of 20, it could be 19. And what does that take out of the project that we don't get? So I'm suggesting that if you have certain things, I have been making notes lots for our meeting on the 18th to make sure that if staff or the consultant hasn't captured it, that I bring it back up. But if any director has anything, is to email it to Joe or one of us directors or something so we can forward it. But that way we can make sure that it is captured. I'm just concerned that we're gonna miss out on some stuff if we're gonna have to add that to the project because we don't have the money. My other thing is, this is for CJ, is what I'm hearing is, what about percentages? So when we say we had 1,623 people do surveys, what is that percentage in areas that have that to break down? Because we have 65,000 people. So is it 10%? Is it 2%? Is it 0.5%? I think that that's something that needs to be in the report so people can go back and go, this is how many people responded in this area. It's just information. Maybe it's not helpful right now, but it's information for in 2026 and going forward that might be useful.
CJ, you got that for the report? Great.
Absolutely, it's already in there.
Yeah, some great thoughts. Great, thank you. Great thoughts on two things. I think Joe's going to follow up with directors on what method they would like to respond, and great thoughts on the working group. We have it there for a reason, and that's a great place to send your concerns as well. Is it on that piece, or is it on something to do with the report? Director Blackwood.
It's on a piece, on a comment that was made by Director Lockwood, and I really appreciate that comment. If directors have a concern, email it to, give us an email address, or have Joe send that up. And some directors might have that concern, might not want that, and that's a good method to do it.
Great, so Director Hanegraaff, Director Lockwood, and Director Tierney are the three on the working group, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So great thoughts. Okay, thank you, CJ. Appreciate your time and for the report. I'm looking forward to the final report coming forward. Great. Have a good rest of your day. Sorry we took up too much time.
Really appreciate it. Thanks, folks.
Great. Okay, we are going to take a 10-minute morning break. So it's 10:30. We'll be back at 10:40 for those online.
Did you get
You on there?
Sorry, there we go.
Okay. Pearl, are you on there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Director Main left at 10:15 and Director Newell left at 10:05.
Got that, Carol?
Director May left at 10:16 and Director Newell left at 10:05. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Aye. Can anyone hear me in the boardroom?
Teresa. One sec, guys, I'm just gonna see. Teresa, are you on there?
I'm sorry, on Baker. No, I was thinking.
Sorry, everyone. Doing it.
One sec, I just need to do a see if.
Yes. I'm here.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure that number was yours. Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you.
Everyone else is there online? Got 4 seconds, but I think we could probably get started since I've got everyone quiet. You guys can hear online, okay? Okay, reconvene 10:40. We are moving on to donation of community services policy. Is that you, Trish?
It is, thank
Okay,
you.
over to you.
Yes, through the chair, I'm going to give Joe a second to load a presentation for you.
Lost my class.
Okay, can everyone see the donation policy presentation now? I'm going to assume there's thumbs up. I can't see anyone anymore.
Sorry, I was telling Joe to mute us and then I realized that they wouldn't be able to hear you and that would not work. My apologies.
Oh, I thought you were telling me.
No. We are all good. Sorry online. I was trying to make sure the sound would be okay and then I realized you are in person and we cannot mute the boardroom. We'll be really quiet.
Hopefully. It's all good. Okay, so I'm going to assume everyone can hear me online. I can't see any of you for thumbs up, but I think there's others in the room that can, and we'll assume we're good to go. Okay, so what I have in front of you for the presentation is just meant to provide some high-level highlights of the detail in the report, as well as the draft policy content that follows the report in your agenda package. And so to me, these were the key highlights to kind of work through the content. Certainly there's lots of opportunity to ask questions as needed. So Joe can flip to the next screen. Okay, perfect. So the main purpose of this is to standardize how donations are managed throughout the Community Services Department. So currently there's been a lot of historical practices. Of course, we support all kinds of groups and organizations with all kinds of different donations from our department that had some structure to them, but they were kind of based on historical practice and not grounded in policy. So we've tried to sort of pull this out and then eventually at the end of this presentation, see how this ties into some other work and other policy that you've already talked about and that's in place, as well as some other work that's going to come down the line. So this particular policy aims to talk about 3 forms of donations. So one are requests that come to us for donations of our services to support fundraising efforts, hockey tournament that might be going on in town, or any other type of community initiative where somebody's come to us and said, hey, could you donate something from your services to help support something we're doing? The next one is donations that come to us to support our services. So that could be anything from, and I'll go into some more detail, but it's things like equipment or supplies that somebody decides out of the goodness of their heart they want to give to us, and it kind of provides some framework around how to manage those. And then we also get requests for advertising in exchange for donations. So those are the 3 primary components of what this policy aims to cover. So I'm going to jump into each of them in a little bit more detail. So the first one is requests for our services. So this whole section, we already do components of this work. And so this just aims to kind of tie it up into a nice little package so we're all doing the same thing for the same reasons. So this has some primary outcomes, which is to support local nonprofit organizations and community groups in their fundraising efforts, create consistency and standardization in how we administer requests, build relationships with user groups and community organizations, improve our tracking and usage and reporting of donations provided through our department, and create opportunities for the public to engage with the RDCK in recreation services in different ways, and certainly to diversify the types of organizations that might be receiving donations. So not just the people that may know to ask, but that we actually have something out there that is available to other organizations. So Jay, you can flip to the next one. So go back one. So this particular one, we've tried to break into 2 different types of donation categories. So This is all around requests that would come from local nonprofit organizations, community groups, local schools, post-secondary institutions, or local sports teams. So there's 3 different packages in 2 different categories that we've tried to put together. And the goal of this was to diversify our options, but create some structure so that groups, depending on what they're doing, could decide on which option might be best suited for them. So for individual sports teams, there were 3 options. So one, as you can see, would be for 3 individual single-family general admission courtesy passes. Another one might be for 3 individual adult general admission passes. And then the third one is for 5 youth general admission single-use passes. So if you can envision what individual sport team fundraisers might be, that could be the Minor Hockey Association doing raffle prizes potentially at a tournament, and they may choose one of those depending on what they think is best suited for their activity. The next grouping of categories went to schools, post-secondary institutions, and nonprofit organizations. So those were a slightly higher, sort of a higher level of donation, recognizing the type of fundraisers that those groups might be looking to do and possibly the significance for the community as a whole. So they have the choice of actually choosing any of the above 3 or the 3 below it as well. So our predominant one that is used right now is 1-month passes. And so for some people that makes sense, where for other organizations, the 1-month pass really wasn't sitting well for the type of activity that the donation was going towards. You know, if you were doing something for youth and wanted that donation maybe to be geared towards youth, a 1-month pass to the facility may not suit someone well, depending on what they do or how they like to use our service, or even if they're in our venue for any length of time. These could be for people that might be visiting or from another community. So those were kind of the 3, there was 3 options within that category. So one was for family general admission passes, or 2 different types of 1-month passes that could be an option for people. And the idea behind these is that in the second category, that should be category B, so schools, post-secondary, nonprofit, is that they could make that request once a year. And so if there, and of course there is a clause in the actual policy document that, say for example, where some of the confusion could come in is, say for a school, you might have multiple different sports teams. Well, does that mean only one request to go to that school? And that's not what this is meant to say at all. It is meant to say that there could be diversification within those options, within reason, that different people within our organizations would be able to approve. So Jay, you can flip to the next one.
Sorry, what was this?
That's okay, go back one. So this is kind of going the other way, where somebody or an organization comes to us with donations that they want to give to community services. And this can literally include anything. And it's surprising what people think we might like to use or could be a benefit to us, but we wanted to put a bit of a framework around what it meant, and also to make it clear that even though that a donation may come our way, it actually may not be in our best interest to accept it. So we wanted to put some parameters around what that might look like. So this is all around unsolicited donations. So if we needed soccer balls and wanted to go out and source soccer balls through some other type of donation, that is not what this is meant to do. This is, I happen to have 15 soccer balls at home because I happen to coach my kids' soccer team in years past, and I want to donate them to someone that I think might use them. And we say, thank you very much. And we just accept them because we think it's a good idea. The idea behind this is also that the donation is, there's no expectation of acknowledgement. And so the concept there is that if acknowledgement is expected, that then you're jumping into a sponsorship process, and that should have different parameters and rules of engagement that are put into a different framework. So this is all around unsolicited donations coming to us. So I've given some examples. Generally, this would be things that we would also see as low cost in value. So I've given a ballpark of roughly, under $250 would be things that we go, yeah, that's kind of a reasonable amount of monetary value that we could say that could fit within this policy. In the actual content, there's also considerations that kind of put a framework around how and why we would accept things. So again, it has to be in good condition. Certainly we have to have a need for it.
a host of different details like that. And there's also, one that I think might be of interest to you is even monetary donations. And actually, this actually came up as recently as a couple of weeks ago in Creston, where a donor simply said, I'd like to provide $500 to the service, and this is what I would like to do. And people don't often understand what it actually to sponsor or donate funding to something, what the actual cost is compared to what they think the donation can go towards. And so in the actual content, you will see, I believe it's on page 33 in your agenda. We put some parameters around how we would use those monetary contributions if it's an unsolicited donation coming to us. So it's things like that we will aim to work with the party to say, this is what you want to do, this is how we think we can achieve that within the parameters of how we provide service already, versus just accepting it and go, well, they said they want to offer a free swim on a professional day from 1 to 3 o'clock and here's $500. And we go, well, we know we can't offer that free service. That money doesn't cover the cost of that donation. So it's then being able to spin the conversation back and say, well, this is what we can do. And this is what this framework aims to provide in the content within the policy. We good so far? Okay. So I'll go through the whole thing and then I'll keep going. So advertising in exchange for services. So this is, Sarah can add anything in here that she would feel is important, but we get a lot of requests, and it really comes in the place of things like tournament programs or calendar offering or any number of things where they say, you know, hey, in exchange for your $200 contribution to our activity or whatever the value might be, we will advertise that you're a partner in this activity. And so we get those requests a lot, and trying to find some fairness and equity in how we manage those requests to go, well, why do we say yes to one and no to another? This document aims to sort of start talking about how we would manage those types of requests. And Sarah, I don't know if you'd like to add anything. You covered it all. All right. Awesome. Perfect. So Joe, you can keep rolling. So we tried to put a bit of a picture as to what the financial considerations might be. We do not have really great historical information on the number of requests that have come from various facilities, with the exception of the NDCC. So I took what I'm going to call probably the last 2 full years of regular, no pandemic influence operational periods of time, and reviewed the types of donations that were provided out of that facility. A large portion of them actually went to social service agencies for actually now what falls under the financial access and inclusion policy. So I pulled all those out and said, those kind of fall into another category now. So by my rough calculation, in each of those years, there would have been approximately 25 requests that, if this policy had been in play, would have roughly equated to being approved under this guiding document. So I rounded that out to go, okay, well, knowing that there were 25, I arbitrarily chose the number of 15 across all the categories, knowing that each of those requests would have only been approved under one, just to try to put some number to what the request might be, and then assume that that might be reflective of what we might see in a calendar year across the district.
So this assumption is across.
I'm sorry?
This is across all of them.
Yeah, so the goal, and again,
Sorry.
Can we not? Thank you.
So under this policy, and again, it's an estimate because we don't have solid information on it, but it was to paint a bit of a picture of what the value was under each option, and if 15 of those were approved across all those different categories, what would that financial contribution be under this policy? I mean, we'll just go to the last slide, and then we can totally open it for questions. Okay. Go ahead, Jill. And then I'm just flagging in this piece that we do have other supporting documents that deal with donations, and to me, it's starting to become important as to tying all of these documents together and reminding everyone of how they all fit. So we do have the RDCK Park Amenity Donation Program, which deals with park benches, memorial trees, and other park amenities. And then, of course, the more recent RDCK Financial Access and Inclusion Policy, where you would see donations to social service agencies supporting the vulnerable populations, which is still yet to really be implemented, but that's where that type of donation would fall towards. So maybe I will leave it at that and throw it back to the chair.
Yep. Director Cunningham?
Well, thank you, yes. I was interested in finding out how much the donations cost, and it's interesting. Of course, as you probably know, when we do our conferences, the district does our conference, like the AKBLG thing, we have platinum sponsors and gold sponsors and plastic sponsors or whatever they are, you know, moving down the list depending upon the amount they give, and it's mentioned in the book that they give us when we enter, or it's online, the opening page. Thank you to our sponsors, and they each get a page if you go online. And do we do some of that same kind of thing? That's the first question, if I may.
So through the chair, so the sponsorship policy, there is not one right now within, I believe within the whole RDCK, but certainly not within community services. So that is work that is coming. It is currently drafted, and the goal is to try to bring that back to you in spring. Where this is donations of our services and unsolicited donations versus us going and seeking $10,000 to support the purchase of a new piece of equipment or to have a chance to buy a stamp on the floor of a new building or something along those lines. That's kind of in that true sponsorship world. Yeah, which this is meant to separate and often gets confused in our department.
Thank you. My second question, if I may, Chair, is do you get many requests from out our way, out Salmo maybe, because I don't see that many ever coming to our rec commission. And we sometimes, we're just wanting to get things through community services somewhere, what?
Requests for donations?
Oh, yeah.
We don't have great information on that. So I hopefully over time, we will be able to better report out on where the donations.
Because I don't have very much great information other than the request to our rec commission. Some rec commissions depend entirely upon requests, and others, of course, offer services in place of doing the request. I'm just really curious because we're in the middle of balancing that kind of thing.
Okay, Director Beckman.
Yeah, thanks. So, totally separate from this, Joe been talking at the time about sponsorships like Zambonis. I think we raised as much as $5,000 a year when we drop 2 decals on a Zamboni. So those things are money. On today's topic, this policy is a good idea. Being more clear and promoting will result in promoting use of the facilities, I think, by giving the donations that we give out. That's all good stuff. So, given the status quo versus endorsing the policy, when we get to it, I'm for endorsing this policy. I maybe want to either add a part of a line, and I haven't chat, I'll do it in a minute. What I'm worried about is it's not large money right now, $4,000 or $5,000. But once people know about this, it could become 10 or 15 or 20. We have right now, say in S224, we have donations and grants coming in, and then we have grants going out mostly for the halls. I'd like to see a line item in the financial plan for donations of each of the 3 major services. And then it'd be nice if the policy actually reflected or let people know that there's a limit. So I just put in chat, under this item, after the 6 bullet points right at the top of the policy, maybe it'd be worth saying the total value of donations by the RDCK for each calendar year will be limited to the amount identified in the financial plan for each of the recreational services at Castlegar, Creston, or Nelson. Just in case this starts to expand, this gives staff enough to say, we got 52 requests this year and we can't fund them all. So if we go ahead with a policy, I'd like to see that little line slipped in there somewhere. I don't know how other people feel, but if it's a new policy, I'd like to see it in the financial plan with a limit.
So I'm assuming you would need an amendment to the actual motion once we get there to add that in.
It would be the policy as amended if people think that's a good idea.
Great. So I've got a few on the speakers list, and then if anyone has thoughts on that addition, you can put your hand up and add to that. Director Lockwood.
Thank you. I have a couple of things. Under the options for individual sports, picking one option over another only gives to one section of people. So is it possible to have an option 4 where it's one single-use family general, one single-use adult, and two single-use youth, like, is a combo, so because we always focus on families, and that's great, although there's some people that don't have families. And so this way, it opens it up to everybody, and I'm not sure if the next one, the schools and post-secondary, if there's something there, that there's a combo that might be better, that is more diverse than just picking one. That's my comment on that. My other comment is on donations. I like what Director Jackman has said, although I think that Selma should be in there. I'll use the pool as an example. My uncle passed away in 98, and my aunt said, anything, if you're gonna buy me flowers, give the Selma pool a donation. The stairs are still there. It wasn't for the stairs, it was for the pool. When my mother passed away in 2016, there's a climbing wall there. That is money from people donating for something. So I'm thinking that that's not, that's missing in the policy is people donating to, a specific item that they may not know about, but our RDCK can say, okay, these are the list of things that we're trying to buy this year. If somebody would like to, and I think that we need to go out into the public more, because people do not realize that you can donate to these kind of things. And I think it's if Director Hanegraaff uses the Castlegar pool and she does lane swimming every single day, and people know that, and her family knows that, she might want her family to make sure that it goes to something for the swimming pool. I just think that we're missing that in the policy, is that we need to make sure that there's where donations are coming from and how it's going into. That's all I have. Thanks.
It's not lane swimming, it's aquanaut, or
I don't know.
Aquafit, but you're close.
She may have participated in that.
Maybe. Moving on, Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So Tricia, I've worked with you. I've had the benefit of working with you, and I know that your policy building is quite thorough. However, I don't think we're going to be able to pass the policy today, because I think there's been a couple of very good examples come forward, Director Jackman, for sure. And I think maybe that you'll probably, I don't know that you had a working group to inform you on this policy, but certainly I was going to put forward and support the policy resolution, but I think it needs a little bit more work right now. So,
Director David.
Yes. So I have a question. For years, I've been providing the Castlegar District Community Services Society with passes that I paid for through community development or discretionary grants, and I would provide 15 youth passes, 10 adult passes. Does this policy now preclude directors from doing that?
Tricia?
Through the chair, absolutely not. You can continue to do whatever you would like in your director role. This is around getting support, or I'm going to call it maybe a framework for supporting, and maybe some transparency around it, ensuring that we're doing providing some donation when requested within a framework that is supported by our organization and certainly through the board, as opposed to it being more what staff feel is appropriate, what we've historically done that has sort of seemed to be approved by or supported by everyone, but it wasn't grounded in a framework. And so this just allows us to say, when these requests come forward, that you as members of the board would know what we are doing and aware of, but it doesn't preclude you from doing, providing passes through a purchase of your own and doing as you wish with them.
Okay, supplemental, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the same would apply like when, like Henny and I pay for some organization that wants to hold a community fundraiser and we pay for the costs of the rental of the complex. Same thing, we still have that discretion to be able to do that.
Through the chair, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Page?
I'm comfortable with the work that's been done here, and I think we can pass a motion that speaks to the proposed amendment that was brought up to do some cost containment. I just want to highlight my rough math is if we tripled this program across all the districts, kind of in the scope of 0.1% of the overall budget impact. And so let's come up with something reasonable in terms of containment that also allows us to get out there and let staff move on, because the staff time is important and there are a lot of projects to work on. And this is an opportunity to both formalize how we take in money and provide recognition for people, as well as create some structure. And when we field these requests, I get requests in my small business as well. How do you hand out $100 or $50 benefits so people can do a fundraising activity? So those always make sense. And then you quite often don't see them circulate back anyway, because it was part of the silent auction of some sort and packaged up with a gift basket or something. And I think there won't be a ton of cost associated with this in the end, but it will have a lot of community value. And so I think we've got enough wordage and verbiage that we should move ahead. So I would move the motion as amended to add some language around costing containing within the budgets, or reference back to the budgets that are done within commissions, and then.
Do we had a second amendment too? Do you want to, with the adding a combo, if someone wanted to use a combination of one of those three options?
I think that's fine.
And adding Selmo to the roster, Casper, Crescent, Nelson, Rec 6. Are we comfortable with both amendments?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we've got a motion on the floor. Director Page, and seconder. Okay, Director Jackman. And so the motion is to pass the policy with the amendment of Director Jackman. I'll just read it. The total value of donations by the RDCK for each calendar year will be limited to the amount identified in the financial plan for each of the recreation services at Castlegar, Creston, or Nelson, and Rec 6. And the other amendment would be that a combination of the options. So that is what's on the floor. Director Watt. Oh, Joe? Yeah.
Sorry, through the chair, you could actually just eliminate identifying the services. Because, for example, there's an Area H recreation service. This might still apply to that, but it's the piece that I think is important, is that it's identified in the financial plan.
Are we okay with that friendly amendment of taking out the areas?
Yeah,
it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Mover and seconder are okay with that. So it's with the amendment that is in chat, but without areas attached, and still adding the combination. Moving on to the speakers list, Director or Chair Watson.
Thank you. Joe addressed what I was going to reference. Was I do agree that we could have other recreation services that weren't named, and so not naming them helps. But I do think it can cause a little bit of confusion when you're dealing with contribution services, where we don't actually manage those facilities. So that might come up. I don't think it needs to be addressed in the motion, but just saying in recreation services, yeah, I think staff can deal with it at that point. We can't, force Lardo Valley Community Center to provide, free fees or something like that. So I think that's the distinction. I think it's covered by removing the areas so that any areas where we're actually doing the programming, this applies to.
Great. Thank you. Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you. Question to staff. Excuse me. Does the amended motion then therefore capture the comments and the suggestions that were brought forward and keep you within the scope of your work? Just want to clarify.
Through the chair, yes, I believe so.
Thank you.
And through the chair to Kelly, if you still get the chance at the board to actually review like at the board, you're actually approving the policy, so you'll get the final policy there in its written verbiage, and you can still make edits at that or send it back.
Okay, although we don't want to have to do too much of that because now we've had a full discussion on it. Just kidding. You're right, Joe. There is always that option. We just don't want to avoid the purpose of this meeting by opening the whole thing back up at a board table. Great. Okay, I don't see any other questions.
Through the chair. Pardon me. It's Pearl. I'm just wondering if you can please repeat the motion.
Sure. So it's the motion that is in the agenda.
Okay.
Except amended, and the amendment is in the chat.
Okay.
Except remove the actual services. So no Castlegar, Crested, or Nelson.
Okay, thank you.
And the second piece to it was adding a combination of the options.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. So all those in favor? And any opposed? I'm not seeing any online, so that passes. Thank you. Moving on to 7.2, regional programming update. Is that you as well, Tricia?
It is.
Okay, over to you.
Thank you. I'll let Joe work his magic. Oh, look at that.
Oh, we're getting quicker.
I learned.
That's a great question.
Maybe not.
And so just while Joe's pulling that up, so Tia has also been a part of drafting this report with me. So she's, I believe, turning her camera on. If it's not already, I can't see her. Are we good? Yeah, I think we're good. Okay. Okay, so this is meant to also highlight the details in the report related to the programming update. So Joe, you can flip to the next page. So there's some really interesting things that we thought some of you will be aware of from other programming updates that have come to your commissions, but for the benefit of everyone around the table, we wanted to highlight a few key initiatives that the programming team has worked on. So this particular one through the CPRA, it's called the CPRA Aquatics Recovery Program. And we were approached back in February related to being a pilot community to receive funding to support the training of lifeguards and aquatic staff to support the recovery of the aquatic service across the country. So we are one of two. We were very specially chosen actually through Salmo, was the original community that got us noticed, I guess, for lack of a better, to the CPRA. And through what their requirements of the grant were, we said, well, we know that Salmo wouldn't be able to support the degree of people that they wanted to see put through the program. So they allowed us to expand this to the entire district. So it is a federal initiative that was meant to support rural communities. It is a funding that literally went towards the registration fees of training programs, and then also could provide a wage subsidy for anybody that was successful through the training that ultimately was hired through the district for our services. We are pleased to be able to tell you that we're literally funneling through emails this morning about the deadline related to submitting our application for reimbursement. I can't find words today. And we figure we're going to have upwards of $18,000 come into the district through this granting program that will have supported 14 applicants in training of aquatics. And I believe it was about 11 of them that were ultimately hired within our department, which is just really great news. So we just wanted to share that with you and thought you might revel in knowing that you were one of two communities, groups in the province to be chosen. So thank you on behalf of all of us through Salmo for that opportunity. So the second one was we wanted to do a little bit of a statutory holiday review, and in part because we were just noticing some nuances related to statutory holiday operations that we wanted to flag for people. And so we wanted to, one, of course, standardize service across the district is our primary goal. over the years, how services have been provided and why they've been provided or funded has evolved. And certainly now, because of the newer structure within community services, this is being highlighted as something that we're like, this is starting to not feel quite right if things are not the same across the district.
Go, when you're done.
We'll go through the whole presentation then.
Perfect. Okay, got it.
Just for sure.
So we reviewed things like hours of operation, where funding comes from to support statutory holiday service provision, and whether services were actually available. We also looked at admissions and whether admissions were paid for by people on statutory holidays or whether funding came from sponsorship or grants or whatever else it might be. So what we found is that with the exception of Castlegar, there was some commonality between all of these services with one challenge. So Family Day is a service that, of course, is relatively new. It's a statutory holiday that's relatively new. And when it was launched, one of our governing bodies, the BCRPA, was provided funding through the provincial government to offer grants to support free services on Family Day. But what we're finding now is that each facility has to apply to that funding source separately, and there's a finite amount of money available. And we, of course, are at risk of either one facility getting funding, one facility not getting funding. And this started to raise the question of, well, what does the board think about if Nelson offers a free service and Castlegar doesn't because funding wasn't received? And what does that look like? We want to have a bit of a conversation around that. We also, as we sort of talked about in the donation policy review, Castlegar is one facility that actually has had a fair amount of success in receiving sponsorships over time to support the provision of free service on statutory holiday, where Nelson and Creston haven't. And so again, it starts to create this, is it confusion? Is there inequity? Is there a concern? And we're just overthinking it. Or what does the board actually wish us to do? So some of the questions that we would appreciate some feedback on are in relation to understanding the risk about this grant and what the expectation would be in the event we didn't actually receive equitable funding across all of our services. So we have a couple of options. One is some services see a free service, some people don't. Others might be build the budgets as if we're going to offer free service, knowing we want that continuity, and if we get money, bonus, or anything in between. I think the other piece is around sponsors, of understanding what the wishes of the group are until we have a sponsorship policy in place, as to what would be the wishes of the group as to, are you comfortable having some services free in one community and not another? Or are you not, and wish that we would look at that differently and maybe hold back on that sponsorship opportunities if they come until we have an actual policy and process in place? Or we could look at it as potentially something that we budget for, that we're going to provide a free service because we want that continuity. And again, recognizing that we don't know what the success of sponsorships will ever be. So we're constantly in this weird ebb and flow with statutory holidays about when funding gets approved to when we actually have to advertise, and that kind of chicken before the egg thing, and what is the best way to manage that service. So we can come back to that question if you want, but that is the crux of where dialogue we're hoping for the All-Right Committee to sort of talk with us about today in this report. So Joe, you can go on to the next one. And Tia, I believe you're online, and Tia was going to take these next couple of points, then I'll come back.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Chair. Sorry. Oh, there we go. I didn't see it on the screen. Okay, so our funded training programs. So some of you may remember back in early 2023, there was an approval to launch an RDCK funded training program to address those staffing shortages after COVID layoffs, and our efforts to quickly recruit qualified staff, because as you know, lifeguarding and fitness positions do require a fair amount of training before they're eligible for hire. So we went through 2023, we extended the program into 2024, and from that effort, we have 68 residents that actually went through this program in some form, taking at least one training course, and 22 of them were hired. This is fantastic news, considering 11 of those were actually from the previous CPRA program. So you can see that, you know, half were pretty much from 2024 and half were from 2023. Staffing levels are improving. This is a really good thing. However, because we're bringing on a lot of new people, our supervisory staff levels, we still have a gap with, because they're just not as experienced, and to have that experience come on board is very rare from an external source. So because of that, the other reason our staffing levels aren't exactly where we need them to be is because we have issues with daytime staffing, finding qualified individuals that can actually work during school hours, because majority of the staff that you will see, especially in aquatics, are actually students, which also results in a high turnover in the department generally. That's just always been the case. So what does that mean for us? How we want to move forward, or how we would like to move forward with this, is to continue to budget for funding training programs. But if we were just to keep it open as it was now, we wouldn't necessarily fill the operational gaps that we had. So what we would like to do instead is to target our funding to specific eligibility criteria to help with those operational needs and operational gaps, because we know that those are the priority in order to get us to where we need to be, to have the supervisory levels we need, in order to keep our pools open, the length of time that we want them to be open. So that is basically a summary of the funded training programs. Should I just keep going, Trisha? Okay. All right, so next on the line then is the data collection project. Many of you have been privy to the rollout of our new data collection project with new information being presented at the commissions. And this is just as early as this September and October. So the goal for this was to standardize a methodology in how we collect our data. And we started with registered programs and drop-in programs, or included with admission programs, as our first focus. As we start to evolve and start to refine our methods, we will start to add on other areas of service delivery. For examples, general admission, memberships, facility usage, leisure access program. Those are just an example of the list that we have, that we need to determine where that next priority lies. One of the things to keep in mind, though, with how long it takes to put some of these things together, it's easy to compile methodology to collect the reports, but our data input is also really important, because right now the way the data is inputted through CSRs at our front desk, facility bookings, all of those practices sometimes aren't consistent amongst the facilities and don't actually output the same type of data. So we need to work on some of our input procedures and clean those up in order for us to be able to have more consistent output for our data for us to report on. Expect that from this point forward, reports will be given quarterly at all the different commissions and committees that exist, and that's your opportunity to be able to ask questions and to also provide feedback as to other ways that you would like to see the information that makes it easier for you to digest as well. And last up is the key programming considerations. So budget-wise, we're not looking for any drastic changes to our budgets as far as program is concerned, but there are some considerations and things that we're actually looking forward to in 2025 that I thought I would highlight with this group. The access and inclusion piece that Tricia is going to get to later on will be just the ripple effect of our implementation of adapted swim lessons. This will allow more individuals with either physical or learning difficulties to be able to have better access and to swim lessons that may not look exactly the same, but gives them the water safety that is really necessary for individuals, especially in our region. We will also continue to do additional training for our camp staff to support children with difficult behaviors. We found that the training that we did do this past summer for our camp staff specifically, they found great benefit in the extra tools and resources to deal with children with learning difficulties or even behavior problems. It just we found there's great benefit and higher quality of programming and service. We will continue with our Swim to Survive events in the Silcan Valley. Unfortunately, this year it was canceled due to the wildfire in the area. So we have every intention of continuing this for 2025. The Nelson District Community Complex, as well as the other arenas, will have the option. The schools, anyways, will have options to have skating lesson instruction to book them with our facilities come January or late January. What this means is, well, this is contingent on the fact that we are in the midst of acquiring staff that are qualified to be able to teach this level. We don't know what level of instruction is going to be able to be provided in each of the facilities, depending on the types of individuals that are able to apply. But we are in discussions with the skating clubs, helping advertise through the skating clubs to get those qualified individuals to help teach some of those skate lesson programs. And with the training program, like we had discussed earlier, we will review, determine absolute what those needs are in each facility that are going to be unique, and look at possible reallocation of funding for our training programs. So that's 2025. Any questions?
Okay. On to my speakers list. Thank you for that presentation. Director Page.
Thank you. I like the program that CASCAR has to solicit donation or sponsorship for New Year's Day. I think that provides a pathway for how we would do that or could do that or approach potential corporate sponsors within our individual communities to also sponsor New Year's Day. So when we have the recommendation to support the alignment of service delivery on statutory holidays, are we taking comments from this table to support that alignment, or would it be presumed, in the motion as recommended now, is it presumed that we would pull back, or is it presumed that we would push forward on other recreation facilities that don't offer the service? And just so I don't have to do a supplemental, like I look at the winter months. I look at the Thanksgiving, the New Year's Day, the Family Day, and the whatever's in March.
Easter.
Good Friday, and those little key areas where we can grow a program in each community, and then also budget on the back end as we do that, so that we know we'll be able to deliver it each year. But if we could find 2 or 3 supporters, then we might be able to provide that service.
So through the chair, if I'm understanding the question correctly, one is you like the idea of alignment of if a service is free in one community, we want to at least put our best effort forward to try to solicit the same like free opportunity in another community, but recognize that that may not actually happen.
Yeah.
There might be an agency out there that says, I feel global enough in the RDCK that I'm interested in supporting New Year's Day in all major facilities or something to that effect. What our process would end up being is if we identify, and like what you said, maybe the winter months of statutory holidays that sort of make sense, when the sponsorship package actually gets approved, because that will guide that process, that we would put an actual public proposal call out to say, this is what we're looking for. This is what the cost is going to be in order to offer this service. Is anyone interested in supporting that service? Is if you like the idea of alignment, that's where we would go. As long as the recognition is there that we still believe that that could lead to disparity between the services, because I don't know, we don't have a good pulse check on sponsorship. Has kind of been part of the operation in Castlegar for a long time. We don't know what the uptake might be in other communities. But if the goal is to say we like the concept of alignment and understand that our best efforts still may not get us there, and that's okay, then we can run with that. And we will then budget to say, we're going to budget as if we're funding operations without a grant or sponsorship coming forward. And if sponsorship is received, it will literally be a kind of a bonus to the financial plan in any given year. Did I understand that correctly?
You did. You explained it perfectly. Okay. And at the end of the day, if the sponsorship doesn't show up or does show up, now we have monies that can be going into reserves, right? Like there's going to be an opportunity to deal with other liabilities.
Great. Okay, Councilor Hennigan. Or Director Hennigan. Wrong chair meeting, Director Hennigan.
So at least you pronounced it right. Yeah, I would hate to see alignment that would result in scaling back what's happening in Castlegar right now, where we have 5 stats that are sponsored. My phone's going crazy. Sorry, it's distracting me. So we've got 5 stats that are sponsored. I would encourage the others to try get the same sponsorship that we're enjoying in Castlegar. I would not want to see that sponsorship scaled back in the name of leveling things out. I think that would be the wrong direction. So that's my 2 cents.
Director Data.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. When Family Day first became a statutory holiday, Area I sponsored that stat, and then Area J joined, and now we split that cost. It's not a huge cost to, like when you look at our service budgets. It is a cost to us because we're using our Area I and Area J discretionary and community development funding to sponsor an RDC, an RDCK type of initiative. So just like with summer camps, we used to run summer camps the same way. We're always doing it off the side of people's desks and not building it into our budgets. And like to have Area I and J sponsoring Family Day, I would rather build it into our budget and say the Castlegar District Rec Commission sponsors Family Day, and instead of us having to use our grant funds to do that. And then the other 4 stats could be private sponsoring. If a private sponsor comes around, says we'd like to sponsor Family Day, great. Then that would be the bonus cost. But right now, like, I don't know how many years, well, since Family Day started, I know Area I has been providing that sponsorship. We also did the same thing with summer camps, where we provided grants. instead of building it into our budgets. And so I would like to see us build it into our budget. I know February is covered, but this would be for future budgets, because staff needed to know from Henny and I, are we sponsoring Family Day? Because the leisure guide is being published. So the key thing is that absolutely, we should be doing this. If they're private sponsors, then we should be backing off and using our tax dollars, our grant funds, to sponsor this through 2 areas. We should actually just build this into our budget. And if another sponsor comes around, bonus money. And then it frees up our grant funds to do other needy work in the community. This should be part of I know in our services, this should be part of our budget. And if there's no sponsor, then we sponsor. That's it.
Thanks, Director. Tricia?
So through the chair, I just want to add one piece of information. Director Davidoff kind of reminded me of the piece that the sponsor policy will aim to address. So one of the pieces of work that, and Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the pieces of work that has not been done is in relation to what the actual cost of sponsoring a service actually is. So for example, Family Day, and it's typically $1,000 grant that comes in, and a condition of that grant is that you provide free service. Well, most municipalities and probably regional governments in the day when that grant came forward said, great, we'll do anything for $1,000 and offer free service. That sounds wonderful. But over time, as other groups have wanted to sponsor, it might be $1,000 to, offered to sponsor New Year's Day with no equation that says, what is the actual cost to actually operate on New Year's Day, to say, is $1,000 the right number? So in the policy framework that I'm trying to create, there's actually an addendum to it that says, here's the equation. If you want to do a 4-hour free statutory holiday sponsorship, the cost is no longer $1,000. It might be $3,000 because we're talking about double time and wages, all the other things that go into the cost. But it does aim to create an equation that says if somebody wants to do something, because we want to be able to work with people, but we also want to be able to do it in a way that says we're doing it the same for everyone, and that sponsorship funding coming in is in relation to something. And we don't have that equation right now. So, to your point, Andy, and it was where you said, it doesn't cost a lot of money to sponsor. I don't know what that might mean in the future. So I just want to flag that for you as we unfold this. So kind of what I'm hearing is we don't want to mess with what's happening. And I don't think we want to mess with what's happening either. I think we like that idea. So there's kind of a bridge between status quo and trying to work with what we do, recognizing that a sponsorship policy that will start to give you a whole lot more information that works with the alignment, if that's what the wishes of the group is, works with that alignment concept, we can bring back to you in March. So I know this conversation could probably go in a lot of directions, and I want to put a bit of a framework around it for everyone where we aren't disrupting. We're not saying we're going to stop accepting sponsorship today. We just want to put it on the table as to what it creates and then suggest the framework going forward. Great. Thank you for that response.
Supplemental, Chair.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, and this is exactly what I was thinking, Trish, is that I know that cost is not meeting the full cost of that time. And so then that means that we have to double or triple our grants that we have to provide. And for some of us, that becomes a little more onerous because it takes away from the small discretionary grant and community development grant budgets that some of us have. So if we build it into our budget, that we're sponsoring that. So it's not an Area I and J event. It's a Castle Garden District Rec Commission sponsored day on Family Day. Build it into the budget, then the actual cost will be there. And then we're not pressured to be providing actual cost in the future. And other sponsors need to know the actual cost. So I like where we're going. Thank you.
Great. Director Watson.
Yeah, thanks. I have a question and a comment. I'll start with a comment. I just want to encourage us to maybe shift our language a little bit when we're referencing children who need some extra care. Identifying them as difficult children is a bit not super kind. Maybe can we just say children that need extra care? Just a comment. And then a question on the subsidization or the wage subsidy for the aquatics. It's not a service we have here up in Area D or Caslow, but I'm curious because this comes up in many other realms where we get a grant to subsidize something, but it's actually subsidizing what essentially becomes operational needs. So is the assumption then, is the wage subsidy timelined? I assume it is because it's a grant. And then what occurs after that? Does that, are those areas with that service already aware of the fact that that's now going to become an operational cost that is not subsidized? Thank you.
So through the chair to Director Watson, yes. So there was a time frame of what they were willing to fund the wage subsidy for, and Tia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was 6 weeks and up to a maximum value of about $1,100 per applicant. So really, this was, if you can envision what this program was targeting, was rural communities that only had seasonal pool operations, and I think that's in part what the interest was in relation to Selmo, was what tweaked their interest for us. And so really, there was a finite period of time where in this case, we were hiring people we needed to operate services that we already had budgeted for, so it was a bonus to our operating expenses that this money will come back into us. So there wasn't a negative impact, I guess, to feel the need to report out on, in a way that we weren't offering something additional that then we were going to absorb later in time. I don't know if I answered that question correctly for you.
Yeah, got a thumbs up. Great, thanks. Director Graham.
Thank you. I like the conversation through the chair of the sponsorships. I had some notes, but that was all covered. So the only question I really have is regarding data collection. And I'm just wondering in the future if we will be able to collect the data on where people are coming from in the services, if that's one of the plans.
Tricia, do you want to answer that? Or do you
I can start it. So through the chair. So for some services, Director Graham, we can identify where people come from because it's part of their registration information, or if they purchase a membership, we can find out that information in siloed ways through our existing software system. What we can't do is figure out effectively, if I do multiple services, I'm counted multiple different times, and there's no way to collate that information effectively that we're aware of. And secondly, anything that is that doesn't require an account to be set up, so drop-in services, pretty much anything that is public skating, general admission, activities or events that we put on, has no tracking ability whatsoever, which is a very large component of our service delivery as well.
Supplemental, if I may. So obviously being from an area that has part of an area that pays into one service and part of an area that does not, it's been a challenge for me to try to ascertain the usage from an area that's not paying into, so that data would be great to have instead of just an anecdotal data. Anything that you have would be helpful.
Thanks. Staff's got that. Great. Director Jackson.
Thanks. I'd like to comment on two major parts here. The one on the training and wage subsidy. Yeah, we ran a surplus, unexpected, unfortunate in some of our wages because we didn't have people to pay. So I don't see any problems with ongoing costs, but I've seen from the training though, say plus or minus $25,000. That's 1% of our wages, costs, our salaries, benefits, etc. It's very small. We have to have training regardless. And our salaries are 1/3 of the total cost. So we're talking quite a tiny amount of money to make sure we're actually able to use that expensive pool and that relatively expensive fitness facility and stuff like that. So I think everything we heard on the training should continue on just the way it is. Whether or not we get a little extra bonus from some other organization, I think it's the worst case is we're closing the facilities entirely because they cost money, open or close. On the alignment of service delivery, I mean, starting with Director Pagey going all the way through, like what I'm hearing, I guess what I would add to it is that I would like to understand the willingness of staff to provide service on some of the staff holidays. Canada Day, for example, between ABC and Creston, there were 4 significant events. The biggest was at the Creston Rec Center, as it turned out, and center closed. Would have been great if the parts of the center at least were open. That would have enhanced that. I only went to 2 of the 4 events, to Crawford Bay, to Canyon, and then town. But I want to understand the willingness of staff to work on the stats and what degree of service we can offer. We're going to try and standardize, because there may be more willingness in some communities than others. And absolutely, as Trish says, we have to understand the costs. My really crude estimate is the incremental cost of opening Creston per day is 4,000 to 5,000. Say half the staff cost are going to be paid regardless. It's background stuff. The other half is frontline, face-to-face. If I'm not here, you can't be here. And if it's $4,000 or $5,000 a year, then Director Davidoff is completely correct in his observation. $1,000 is insignificant as the reason to stay open. But I look forward to seeing those costs. I really don't think frontline, first we need to know if staff are willing to be open on those days. And if they are, yeah, I would fund it within the current budget. And then I think, as it was said, take the donations as a bonus separately. Because I really got lots of questions. Wow, why can't we go in the rec center? We're here. And there's maybe a pause in action between one thing and the other happening outside in the field, and people would have loved to done a little more while they were there. So going in a good direction.
Do you have a comment on staffing levels, if the staff would be willing to work on?
Yeah, so through the chair, I'll turn it to Craig. Through the chair, we have mechanisms and language in the collective agreement and employment standards that we can make that happen with. And being a compassionate employer, we wouldn't force people to work Christmas Day, for example. Most people ask for their birthdays that don't always fall on stat holidays anyway, but we can make that happen.
Supplemental chair. I had to go to a budget meeting with 300 people in Creston on my birthday, March 13th. So where was the compassion? I walked out when I said it would at 8 o'clock. Thanks very much. Thank you, Director.
All right. Noted. Don't book your budget on your birthday. We got it. Director Lockwood.
Thank you. I'm going to go on a whole different, when we were talking about the Family Day funding, and when you say that you have to apply, is it applying for the Nelson Rec Corps, the Cal, like, is it applying for individual facility? So you can't apply if it's not a facility?
Good, through the chair, good question. I don't think I've ever thought about applying, or even everywhere I would have applied for that grant, it would have always been a facility based. So I don't actually, if I know the answer to that.
So, through the chair, I do.
Yeah, over
the application for the grant is based on a facility and a specific event that is going to occur during that time, so they can make a determination whether or not that group or that facility is eligible.
Yep. Okay, thank you. And with going with that, okay, I'm going to use Samo as an example. There's never been a Family Day event by the RDCK in Samo, but the Samo Ski Hill, which is not in Samo, it's actually in Hanson's area, but it's 2 seconds away from Samo, puts on a Family Day event every year. So I'm wondering how many Family Day events are happening outside of RDCK that we're not either helping with or supporting in whatever way. And is there a way of making that, I get it that it has to be an event, but is there a way of making it that as we speak regionally, because we are not Nelson, Castlegar, and Creston, there's 17 other areas, is there a way of actually putting on 2 events or 3 events, and maybe one happens in area K, maybe one happens in area A, maybe one happens, and try and see if we can spread that family that reaches more of those people that can't get to facilities.
Before I go to staff, I'll just, Director Hewitt did say that they do get funding to put on their forest events. So I'm guessing that individual organizations can also apply for that. So like the Samuel Ski Hill might be able to apply as well.
They do.
Yeah. Do you have a question on the regional part though? Or, I mean, a response on the regional part?
No, well, I think through the chair, it's kind of like, in a way, a little bit like, the regional district is an elephant, and we can only bite so much of it off every year, so we tend to be focused around the easiest things that we can implement. So that tends to be around facilities. For Salmo, for example, there is no reason why, and I'm sure Craig is typing this in right now, but the reason why we couldn't consider like an event inside the gymnasium, for example, in some. We don't have the pool or something like that. And our events in the centers tend to be around the pools. That tends to be what they have been in the past. So that has been the kind of like the crux of those kinds of events. And those tend to be ones that we can manage easily and well on that day and not add tremendous cost or tremendous planning that's required for them.
I'm just suggesting that we look at who is putting on Family Day. I know that Samuel Ski Hill actually applies for money. Who is putting them on, and how do we, as a district, support those and maybe it gets it more out there in rural areas. That's all I was thinking.
Yeah.
I think staff has got that note. Let's take it. Director Vandenberg.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So there's a request this is a big report, lot to unpack. So I will get your pen ready. I will say to you, number one, I believe there's 12 statutory holidays that we're talking about. What is the cost per day? I've heard $1,000 and $3,000. If that's the case, we're talking about 40 grand a year. And so secondly, how many people are coming in on these stat days? How many people take advantage of these things? These are the kind of basic information that I would like to know. And we're having a conversation around the 2025 budget on this. And I heard Tricia say bringing this back in March. Well, that's too late. So these are basic things that I would like to know when considering this statutory holiday thing. Funding and training. I have to believe that prior to 2023, we had a budget for training. We enhanced that budget to take care of limited personnel, and it was successful. So my question is, for 2025 budget, are you talking about an increase in this targeted budget training for 2025? Or are you proposing what we have done or what we had done in the past? Need clarity around that. And I guess the last point that I would talk about is the training required on the programming consideration side you referred to as behavior threshold, learning difficulties, and behavioral care, I think was the new word that we're using. Two totally different types of people, number one. Okay, you can't put them together. Number two, I think it's fair that parents understand that there is a minimum threshold or criteria around behavior that any child has to maintain in order to participate in a camp. And to train for every possible scenario. My wife's a teacher. You can't do it. Okay. But parents need to be cognizant that if there is an issue around not being able to meet that criteria, you come and pick them up. because it's impossible to put proper training in place, and it's unfair for staff to have to deal with some of these things. So those are my comments. I don't know when these comments are going to get implemented. I don't know when we're going to be able to talk about this again prior to our budget in 2025, but these are the questions that I would need to have answered. Thank you.
I think the statutory holidays, I'll comment on that one, was just the winter holidays. That's why it's probably different statutory holidays than you're thinking. It's just when it's lower access to being outside, correct? That's why there's only 5 of them. And then the cost and amount of people that are using it. Do you have answers on that piece?
So through the chair, I think that's what Trish was identifying in the report that we're doing work on, and that's in particular in concert with the sponsorship policy. So to be clear, I think what Trish was communicating is that for this year, our planning is status quo. So like what we have done in the past. Mm-hmm. What we wanted to get a sense of today was this balance between, where this conversation led, like, is it uncomfortable? Because we get this at moments in time. Is it uncomfortable if we're successful in one place in getting a sponsorship for a particular holiday, and that space is open, and at the same time we have that Facebook post going out saying this space is open and these 2 are closed, that creates political pushback in lots of cases, and then we're reacting. So like that's the type of conversation that we're trying to understand. So to Director Vandenberg's point, we would not do anything that we did not have approval for in a budget. So that will definitely be part of the budget discussions. But we're trying to get that context for creating a transparent service and how we do things for you. That's what we're trying to understand. So I think we've gotten actually a lot of good information today that we're going to be able to work with. I'm going to go to the camp one because, so what we are doing, Kelly, completely agree, there is a certain level of behavior that we can handle. What we are doing is expanding the level of behavior that our camp staff can do. So for example, I don't think we specifically said it, but one of our training opportunities this year, and I've heard a tremendous amount of good feedback from our staff who took this, was the Canucks autism training. So that actually enabled us to integrate, to actually have those things not become a problem. I think it's also, just us, our understanding, but completely agree, we cannot be something for everything in camps. But we also have what the discussion missed a little bit, not missed, but we said that we've already got this program in place. We have a way for children that are that need individual support for their support workers to participate in our programs. That piece we've already got. So we are looking almost at everything, whether it's our lifeguard training, our skate patrol training, our access into our buildings, all of those things we're trying to make sure that we're as accessible as possible within the support structures and that our budgets enable. So that those kinds of things are there. Just forgetting, there was a third question.
So through the chair, Kelly brought up the budget and whether there was going to be a budget. If this is an enhancement, is it the same as sort of what it was? Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was kind of the general gist of it. And I know through conversations with Tina and Joe that the idea is that no, there's no plan to increase budgets for training. If anything, what we're doing is reevaluating what that training has those dollars have historically provided, and whether we need to shift the priorities within that budget allotment to other priorities to continue to best provide services in the district.
Good. And the last thing would be around the amount of people that use those statutory holidays. Do we have numbers?
And through the chair, my apologies. I don't have that information off the top of my head, and I'm kind of looking at Tia, who I'm guessing maybe doesn't either, but we could certainly bring that back as a further comprehensive report.
I can see from Castlegar, it's lots. They're full, fuller than full.
Supplemental.
And just through the chair.
Yeah, one sec, Joe's just gonna.
We're actually at the point, like even in, so for example, one of the things that is cheer events, which is a low cost admission day. In some of our facilities, we have to be very careful about when we do that because we will quickly go over capacity. So, like this is the actual issue in some ways is about managing when these events happen. So because we actually create a tremendous demand that we can't meet.
Yes, supplemental, Kelly? Or Director
Yes, thank
Adams?
you. And yes, thank you very much. Everything was captured quite nicely, including the last part, which I wasn't sure, but that head count is necessary. We need to know if my taxpayers are subsidizing this, there needs to be that value to it. There's got to be people coming out to take advantage of it. And without that information, how do I make a proper budget decision? So, but I think everything else was captured very well. Thank you.
Okay, so there is a motion in the agenda. My concern with the motion is it actually says very specifically like alignment through all the service delivery. What I'm hearing from the table is we don't necessarily want alignment. We want to work towards that, but if that's not something we can achieve, we're okay with it not being achieved. So do you need this motion or do you have enough direction? What would you like from staff's perspective?
So through the chair, and Joe can correct me with what I think we need, I believe we can almost table it as information and direct us to come back with, I'm gonna call it more information, but maybe a program around statutory holiday service provision. And in the meantime, we will continue to work with commissions around budgeting appropriately for statutory holiday services going into 2025 so that we can actually keep moving on it and not lose time, but at least move in the right direction.
That was my good. No, that's kind of what I thought. I just wanted to make sure you guys had what you needed. Okay, we're gonna move on.
So, Chair, should we refer this motion to the next fall rec meeting? So it's there.
Sure, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, do you want to?
Sure.
Okay. So we got Jackman and Lockwood on referral to the next rec meeting.
On the referral, I just kind of wonder if we just want to withdraw it because when we get a program back, it's going to be a different set of recommendations versus just referring this to motion. Right now, it's a report and an intention being in the same program.
I think the concern is that we won't have a criteria of when it's coming back to us if we don't refer it, if there's no specific. So maybe it's more direction around bringing back some kind of supplemental, report. Yeah, are we comfortable with that instead?
I'm comfortable with either one.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm just thinking of leaving a recommendation hanging. Either we should state no action on this recommendation and then direction to staff, come back with a report with quantification, costs and opportunities, or we can refer the motion and then sort it out later. So
okay, let's just refer the motion for the sake of time, and we will, we'll refer the motion for sake of time, and then we will deal with it then. No problem. Any discussion on that? On referral? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Looking online, not seeing any opposed. For the sake of time, are any of the next two quick? Do you want to move any of them? What are you thinking from staff?
Through the chair, the next one is very quick, and then the next one we should at least start the conversation.
Okay, so moving on to 7.3. I just got a notice from Director Watson that there is another meeting in 20 minutes. So I just want to make sure that. Okay, over to you, Craig.
Through the chair, this is an update to the report we provided in June at the All-Rec meeting about two projects, the asset management project, which is, Joy, can you go? Yeah, thanks. Which is being led by the senior project manager, and the greenhouse gas reduction feasibility study, which was being led by the senior energy specialist who has since moved on and is now being led by the senior project manager. Community services are large stakeholders in both of these projects, and so we are at the table with consultants and project management on this. Both projects will inform asset management planning and practices and policies and budgets. And the good news is, Joe can go to the next slide. We will have draft reports from Roth IAMS regarding the asset management roadmap within a month, and we intend to be at the board in December with their roadmap. Next slide, Joe. And for the BES study that they're doing, their draft reports have been received, and there's some additional scope that came to the board a few months ago related to Fortis funding for renewable natural gas study related to some additional scope. We're anticipating, though, that being finalized this month, and then getting the reports from BES in time to have a report to the board either December or January, which will inform budgets for 2025.
That was quick. Thank you. Director Vandenberg?
Yes, thank you through the chair. So my questions are around the FCM GHG reduction feasibility study. I have looked back in the minutes. I cannot find the origin or the scope, the source document on that. I would like to have some help to be able to refer to that because it seems to be just thrown in here. Because I need to know, will it have a 2025 budget implication before coming to the board in December 2024? I want to be able to be in a position to understand that. More importantly, my question around that report will be, is there going to be a cost benefit analysis built in to that report? So that's a question to staff. If there's not a cost benefit of analysis built in, that will be of a high concern to me. And where is the report that I can find it and get myself brushed up in it? And will the report contain a cost benefit analysis?
Through the chair, we can provide background reports that have come to the board from the genesis of this program, this project for the greenhouse gas feasibility study. We can find that and send you a link. But the cost benefit analysis will be part of the feasibility. There are recommendations to make changes and improvements to the capital assets, and they also provide a return on investment in years of payback. And that is to get us to our 2030 and 2050 greenhouse gas reduction goals. And so the pathways will make those recommendations. And will it affect the 2025 budget? I mean, at a service level, there's always the conversation of not, for 2025, not implementing the recommendations, but certainly for 2030 and 2050, I believe those will be board directed.
Thank you. Supplemental?
Yeah.
Yeah, just simply thank you for that. And can you share that with all, not just with me, with everyone? Thank you. The location of that source document and such.
Yes, great. So good. Great. Director Watson.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things. Please don't send me all those reports via email. They're all on eScribe, and I'm happy to get them there. So maybe just a link. My email will crash. It's so full. In terms of this coming back to the board, please don't do that. You have sub-regional meetings, you have budget meetings, you have commission meetings. If this comes to the board, as you can see through this meeting, there's a lot of discussion that's necessary, and that's the purpose of these committees. So a final report that's taken this many years to get to, that's going to have really important information for budgeting, will get short-circuited at the board table because there isn't the time. So I'd really recommend that those, I just also want to say on the item on the amount of rec commission meetings we have in the upcoming year, we obviously need more because we need more time for conversation. So I would redirect those. The board should be receive the report, this is information, redirect it to your budget meetings and your sub-regional conversations. So I just want to clarify the process on that and make sure there is the time for people to have these discussions, and not to discount what Director Vandenberg wants for information. Just please don't do it over email. I'm constantly having to delete things. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Through the chair, we've taken what Craig and myself and even AJ have realized that you said you weren't getting updates on where that project was going. So we're doing that at this table to give you, as most of the board is here, to give you that update. But that was a board initiated project, not an all recreation commission initiated project. We were just using this forum to give you that update. So if the executive wants to have a discussion about how that those board initiated projects should be rolled out, I think the executive should talk with Stuart about that. So we were just using the opportunity to make sure that you are all, like, it's been hanging out there and we know that you haven't necessarily been hearing about it. So we were just taking the opportunity to let you know when these things were coming.
Supplemental.
Yeah, go for it.
Happy, we will discuss it executive. Just know that everything we do is board initiated because the board is the approving agency. Our committees are to discuss and detail the items. So it'll get redirected back and make sure you have some appropriate meetings planned.
Right, and through the chair, what I mean is it's just not about, those reports are not just about community services. They're about all assets and all of our targets for the entire, whether it be a fire hall or this building right here, it's all inclusive.
Yes.
So we were just trying to give you that update of when all of that information was coming.
Great. Okay, Director David, I do see your name, but I'm thinking you're for 7.4, so we're moving on.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to move. I'd like to move option 2 in the next item.
Yeah, that's what I just want to make sure you didn't want to speak to this one. Okay, we're going to move on to 7.4 and then I'll come back to you, Director David. 7.4 over to Tricia.
So through the chair, I will aim to be no more than twice as long as Craig. So you have the report, and really the whole purpose of this report is to highlight all of the various initiatives dealing with access and inclusion things within community services. So the first one, Tia put in here related to some of the training that we've already talked about from the Canucks Autism Network, and that was funded through a grant that was provided to us, and it was very well received. So we just wanted to flag that training did occur, where the funding came from, and that that is now leading to new programming or enhanced programming opportunities, certainly within various services. So under the financial access and inclusion policy, I'll maybe tweak your memory that there were 4 sections of that policy document, and I wanted to provide an update on where things were at with each of those sections. So in the little chart, you can see sort of where different initiatives are at. And the primary one I want to focus on today is in relation to the Leisure Access Program. So you'll recall maybe back in, I think it was like the 3rd week of August or so, I sent an email saying, we've got an issue and we've had to delay the implementation of that launch of that change in how we could provide more service to people who qualified for the Leisure Access Program due to some monumental challenges that Joe and I and our new person working in our business coordinator role needed to resolve. So one of the key things of that is we have it resolved. So I'm very pleased to be able to say that. I can't tell you how happy I am to actually give you that news today. But some of the challenges, and just to appreciate the complexity of where this went, are highlighted on page 2, sort of in the middle. There's 2 bullet points. And so the challenges were really related to the financial system that the regional district is obligated to follow. And so no software, this isn't a software problem. This is literally just a complex financial system that the regional district is in, that we had to try to work within in order to meet our requirements for reporting through our financial means. So it just took a long time to figure that out. But in order for us to now move forward, you'll see at the bottom, we're recommending changes to that implementation strategy that I wanted to highlight for you. So the first one is, in lieu of not wanting to impact anybody who was in financial need now and was receiving some benefit under our old program, we extended the expiry date of their existing membership, which basically says they've gone through a process to be vetted, to be in financial need, from September of this year to December 31st. And that never came to you because we had to make a decision out of not wanting to impact those people. Now what we're doing is saying, okay, now that we have this resolved, we now need to go through a whole bunch of work of training staff, updating these accounts, communicating to the public who are in this program what this new program will be. And we also don't want them to be forced into a new application process prior to, or unnecessarily is maybe a better way to put it, knowing that we're ultimately trying to realign the expiry of their pass or their validation back to May 31st as it was before. So in here, you will see that one of our asks is to adjust or extend the expiry date of all existing pass holders to May 31st of 2025. And then as of January, though, we believe that in the next roughly 8 weeks or so, that we can start the back end work that would allow those people to be able to start using their subsidies come January 1st of 2025. So there'll then be 5 months of time where we'll actually, almost 6 months of time, where people will be able to use that service. We'll be able to see where subsidies are being used. We'll actually start to get some reporting. And then it won't be until after May that people will then have to reapply under the new application process for the next year of their approval. So that would give us then time to be able to communicate with them, have them adjust to the new program, know what the expectations are, and sort of move forward in a way that we think is reasonable for both staff as well as the public who benefit from the program. I've highlighted a couple of those pieces of work that will be done. That of course, in March when we come back to you, we can certainly continue to update you on this program. I know it's near and dear to many of you. So that is a key component of this report that I wanted to bring forward today. The last piece in here is free and low-cost programming. For those that may not be aware, we had our first 3 cheer events at the end of October. So one happened, actually 4 at the end of October. So one in Nelson, one in Selma, one in Castlegar, one in Creston. And we do have some preliminary information of feedback. So we had 55 people attend that session. It was an hour, there was a window of an hour that people could come in under this cheer event pricing. And so 55 people in Nelson, 13 in Selmo, 19 in Castlegar, and 39 in Creston. And the feedback that anecdotally from staff so far, which we're continuing to gather across the different staff that are involved in this, is that there was very positive feedback from people who attended. Certainly not all of the times that within the facilities were after school, so attendance is going to vary. So for example, in Castlegar, it was between 1:30 and 2:30 versus in Creston, it was from 3 to 4. So those different times will vary in the degree of attendance we're able to attract. And that certainly we have these like events being planned in November and December, and we will again continue to report out on those at future all-rec meetings. So really the ask of today is around the adjusted schedule related to the leisure access program is the primary. Great.
Yeah, I'll go to Director David up. I see you want to move motion 2, which is to support the revised implementation of the plan for leisure access program.
So moved.
Okay, so seconded by Director Jackman. Any discussion on that? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And not seeing any opposed? Carried. Okay, thanks. Moving on to new business. Who is Joe?
So through the chair.
I was like, okay.
Yeah, so through the chair for 821. So from the Castlegar District Rec Commission, there was a recognition that in many places we're doing some things differently, and that could cause issues with different processes. So all this is all this is right now is just asking us to bring back information.
Director Page?
Thanks for this. I'll try to be quick. There has been, we do the Nelson Ambassador, Sports Ambassador. There has been some generative discussion about an advisory committee that eventually might live at rec commission instead for the adjudication of such a thing. So our conversations I started with you, Joe, but I think in the scope of this, maybe we want to consider what that looks like, so that we're doing something consistent across all the facilities, well, major communities.
That noted? Okay, good. Director Popov.
Yeah, that will be the recommendation.
Great. Moved by Director Popov and seconded by Lockwood. Any other discussion on bringing that report back? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And not seeing any opposed. And then we're going to 8.2 proposed meetings. I'm wondering if we keep our meetings, but we obviously just adjust our time to 12:30. So people are just having an expectation that we're going to be here, and we've been keeping track. I think having it at noon, we're never getting done. So let's just make sure the meeting either 12:30 or 1. 12:30 seems to be reasonable, and that's just our expectation. Instead of it being, we're feeling rushed if we give ourselves a bit more time. Any discussion on that? Yeah, Director Lockwood?
Is there any reason it goes Tuesday, Thursday, Thursday? It doesn't matter? Usually it's always on the same day. So that
Should be Wednesday.
capture April.
Oh, that's why I changed the date, yeah.
We should be Wednesdays. Is that Joe just checking to make sure?
I'm sorry.
Thought I looked at it.
None of us are gonna remember these dates anyway until we get a calendar invite, so. Well, I'm just kidding. We want to.
So it should be April 2nd.
April 2nd, June 25th,
June 25th.
For June?
No, October 29th.
and October 29th.
Yeah.
Okay, so April 2nd, June 25th, and October 29th. Pearl, you got those date changes?
Somebody sent them out so they can be included in their calendars. Perfect.
Making sure that you capture the minutes.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, great. And do you need a motion on these dates or just for information?
No, we need, those need to be set by the committee.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it didn't, okay. Anyone want to make a motion for those 3 dates and go until 12:30? Great, Director Hanegraaff and Director Page seconded it. Any discussion on those dates? Not seeing anyone. All those in favor? And no opposed. And we're going over to old business. This is over to Director DeBoon. I believe this got referred to this meeting. Am I correct? And I think what we just need around it is what information we're looking at from staff to come back with. Sorry, yeah, Director DeBoon?
Yeah, I've not received anything new on this, and so I don't know if there's any type of proposal from staff or anywhere to find a way to reduce the costs of some of these tournaments. And so without any further information, unless there is some to be provided, I would just defer at this time.
Would this, just going back to staff, would this fall under a conversation around our fees and policies, like fees and charges?
Correct.
Okay, so can we capture that when we have that conversation, which I think comes up every year?
It will come up in April.
In April, okay. So during that meeting, that gets captured in there, what we do and what some options and all of that. Is that okay, Director DeBoon?
That'd be fine with me, yeah.
Okay, great. It gets captured. Okay, public, yeah,
Sorry.
Director Page?
We had Community Tourism at council not that long ago, and they have sponsored events in the past or produced events in the past, and their membership was interested in more activity around sports or recreation, so potentially a partner for sponsorship for tournament events specifically.
Great. Yeah, Director Papa?
Yeah, do we have to refer this to April?
Do you need an actual referral, or do you got that captured in your report and it can now get off? Like, what do you need done with this?
Through the chair, if it's okay with the committee, we will include that in our report on fees and charges.
Yeah, and it looked like I asked Director DeBoon and he said that would work for him. So, okay, great. Public time. We don't have anyone here in the room. Do we have anyone online? Is there? Oh, yes, there is. There is a couple observer, or Holly, if you have a question for us, you can unmute and ask your question now. Hi.
All right. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm not sure if I had missed this. I joined a bit late. In regards to the concession at the complex, is there any way that we can address not having anybody in there, or?
Are you talking about the Casper complex?
Yes, sorry, the Casper complex for the Rebels game, for all of our hockey tournaments. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go over to staff to say if you want to answer now or follow up.
Through the chair, do we have an update on concession for Casper?
Oh, through the chair for this committee, we're just finalizing the details on a contract with a proposed contractor. And I think we're within days of finalizing that.
Great. Did you hear that, Holly? So they're just days of finalizing a contract with a provider there.
I did. Thank you so much for answering that.
No problem. And Observer, do you have any questions for us? You can unmute. Not seeing any. Okay, next meeting will be the April 2nd at 9 a.m. And on that, I call for adjournment.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks online. See you later.